Welcome back to Sleepy Scientist. Tonight, we're going to spend some time with spring. Not any one spring in particular, but spring as a season, as a pattern, as a slow and gradual shift in the world around us. We'll move through the science of how seasons form, what spring actually does to the land, to the air, to the soil and the water. We'll look at what happens in forests and fields, in rivers and wetlands, in the cold soils of the northern hemisphere, and in the warming skies above them. We'll look at what spring means to plants, to animals, to birds migrating thousands of miles across open ocean, to insects waking after months of cold dormancy. There's a lot to explore, and none of it needs to be rushed. If you're settling in for sleep, that's completely fine. The narration will continue at this pace throughout. You can drift away at any point, and if you find yourself listening again an hour from now, you'll be welcomed back exactly where you are, into a quiet exploration of one of the most gradual transformations the natural world produces. If you're listening while resting, or simply enjoying something calm to accompany a quiet evening, then welcome too. There's nothing here that demands your full attention. Spring itself rarely does. Let's begin. Spring is a season of transition. It sits between the cold and the warmth, between stillness and movement, between dormancy and activity. It is not the warmest season, nor the coldest. It is, in many ways, the season of becoming rather than being. In the most basic terms, spring occurs when a hemisphere of the Earth tilts back toward the sun. The planet doesn't move toward the sun in spring. The orbit doesn't change. What changes is the angle. The tilt of the Earth's axis, which sits at roughly 23.5 degrees relative to its orbital plane, means that as the planet moves around the sun over the course of a year, different parts of the surface receive sunlight at different angles and for different durations. Spring arrives when the days begin to lengthen, when sunlight strikes the ground at a higher angle, and when the accumulated warmth begins to exceed what the surface is losing to the cold. This is a process measured not in days but in weeks and months. Spring doesn't announce itself with a single event. It accumulates. There is a precise astronomical moment called the vernal equinox, the point at which the sun crosses the celestial equator moving northward, and day and night are approximately equal in length. In the northern hemisphere, this falls around the 20th or 21st of March each year. In the southern hemisphere, the same astronomical event marks the beginning of autumn, while the spring equinox occurs around the 22nd or 23rd of September. But the calendar date of the equinox is only one way of marking the beginning of spring. Many cultures and ecological traditions recognize spring beginning earlier or later depending on what markers they use. Meteorological spring, which is used by weather services in many countries, begins on the 1st of March in the northern hemisphere. Phenological spring as measured by the behavior of living things, begins when the first consistent signs of biological change appear, which can vary by several weeks depending on the year and the location. Spring, in other words, is not a single thing. It is a gradual accumulation of changes, each one small, each one connected to the others. To understand spring, it helps to understand the geometry that produces it. The Earth travels around the sun in an elliptical orbit. This orbit is nearly circular, but not perfectly so. The Earth is actually slightly closer to the sun in January, during northern hemisphere winter, than it is in July. This means that the seasons are not caused by the Earth's distance from the sun. The difference in distance is small, only about 3%, and it has only a modest effect on seasonal temperatures. What matters far more is the tilt. Because the Earth's axis is tilted, the amount of sunlight received at any given location changes throughout the year. In summer, sunlight in the higher latitudes arrives at a steep angle and the days are long. More solar energy reaches each square meter of ground. In winter, the sun sits lower in the sky, the light is spread over a greater surface area, and the days are shorter, so less energy accumulates. At the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun is positioned directly above the equator. Every point on Earth receives approximately 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. But this equality is temporary. After the spring equinox, days in the northern hemisphere continue to lengthen, with the sun climbing higher in the sky with each passing week, until the summer solstice. What this means in practice is that spring is a season of accelerating light. Each day is longer than the last. Each day, a little more solar energy reaches the surface. The soil, the water, the air, all of them slowly absorb this energy and begin to warm. The process is gradual but consistent, and it drives almost everything that follows. One of the more interesting features of spring is that warmth doesn't arrive on the equinox. There's a delay. Even though the days are lengthening and the sun is climbing higher from late December onward in the northern hemisphere, the coldest temperatures typically occur in January and February, weeks after the winter solstice. Similarly, even though the sun begins delivering more energy to the surface from the equinox onward, the warmest temperatures of summer often don't arrive until July or August, weeks after the summer solstice in June. This lag exists because of thermal inertia. The land, the oceans, and the lower atmosphere store heat, and it takes time for that heat to accumulate to the point where temperatures begin to rise noticeably. The ground and the sea are still releasing the cold they absorbed during winter even as the sun begins to deliver more energy. Only when the rate of energy input exceeds the rate of energy loss does the temperature begin to climb. This is why spring mornings can still be cold even when the days are clearly getting longer. The soil might still carry the cold of February well into March or April. Snow can fall in April in many parts of the world. The calendar says spring. The soil and the air are still working through winter's accumulated cold. The oceans are especially slow to respond. Large bodies of water moderate the climate of nearby land areas, and coastal regions often experience a delayed spring compared to interior continental areas. In maritime climates, along the Atlantic coast of Western Europe, for example, or the Pacific coast of North America, spring tends to arrive gradually, with mild but unpredictable weather stretching from late winter deep into what is meteorologically already spring. The soil is often the first place where spring makes itself known at a fundamental level. Soil is not simply dirt. It is a complex mixture of mineral particles, organic matter, water, air, and an enormous population of living organisms, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, worms, insects, and countless other creatures. In winter, many of these organisms either become dormant or slow their activity dramatically. Microbial processes, the decomposition of organic material, the cycling of nutrients, continue at a reduced rate through the cold months, but they are muted. As the soil begins to warm in spring, microbial activity increases. The decomposition of plant material that has been slowly breaking down through winter begins to accelerate. Nutrients that were locked in cold, dense organic matter become more available. The soil, in a sense, begins to breathe again. The depth to which soil freezes varies considerably by location and by the severity of the winter. In some regions, only the uppermost few centimeters freeze. In others, in the northern boreal forests of Canada and Russia, for example, frost can penetrate to a meter or more. The thawing of deep soil is a slow process that continues well into what residents would already call spring or even early summer. In permafrost regions, areas where the ground below a certain depth remains frozen year-round, spring is marked by the melting of only the uppermost active layer. The deeper permafrost doesn't thaw. This has profound effects on water movement, plant growth, and the broader ecology of those landscapes. In the more temperate regions of the middle latitudes, the thawing of soil in spring is accompanied by a period of unusual wetness. Frozen soil acts almost like concrete. Water cannot permeate it and runs off the surface. As the frost retreats, and before the soil has fully reopened its pore spaces, water from melting snow and spring rains can pool on the surface or move quickly into streams and rivers. This is one of the reasons spring is a season associated with flooding in many parts of the world. Where snow has accumulated through winter, its melting is one of the defining events of spring. Snowpack, the accumulated depth and density of snow that builds up over a winter season, acts as a kind of slow-release reservoir. Snow doesn't simply evaporate or vanish when temperatures rise. It melts gradually, releasing water steadily over days and weeks. In many mountain ranges, the snowpack accumulated through winter provides a large proportion of the total annual water supply for the regions downstream. The Colorado River in North America, for example, depends heavily on snowmelt from the Rocky Mountains. The Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra all depend partly on snowmelt from Himalayan snowfields and glaciers. The timing of snowmelt is therefore not merely a seasonal detail. It has significant effects on river levels, groundwater recharge, agricultural water supply, and the hydrology of entire regions. When snow melts faster than the ground can absorb it, which often happens during rapid spring warm-ups, rivers rise. Spring flooding is a natural and regular occurrence along rivers that drain large snow-packed watersheds. In some rivers, the spring flood pulse is so predictable and so important to the surrounding ecosystem that many plant and animal communities have evolved to depend on it. Floodplains that are inundated every spring become among the most productive habitats in the landscape. The water itself, moving from snowfield to stream to river, carries with it the dissolved minerals it picks up along the way. Meltwater is often clear and cold, and it introduces a pulse of nutrient-poor but oxygen-rich water into river systems that may have become stagnant and oxygen-depleted under winter ice. Ice itself, on lakes, on rivers, on ponds, melts in spring in a process that is gradual and somewhat variable depending on depth, water chemistry, and the rate of warming. The breaking up of river ice in spring can be dramatic in high-latitude rivers, where large sheets of ice crack and grind against one another before being carried downstream. This process, called ice breakup or ice out, is closely watched in many northern communities and has been tracked in some locations for well over a century. Long before the temperature rises enough to feel like spring, the lengthening days are already being detected by living things. This detection is not metaphorical. Many plants and animals have evolved physiological mechanisms for measuring day length, the number of hours of light in a 24-hour period. This ability, known as photoperiodism, allows organisms to anticipate seasonal changes rather than simply react to temperature. An organism that waited for temperatures to warm before beginning to prepare for spring might miss the optimal window for growth or reproduction. One that responds to day length can begin preparing weeks in advance, ready to take advantage of warmth as soon as it arrives. Plants use light-sensitive proteins called phytochromes to detect the ratio of daylight to darkness. When days reach a certain length, which varies by species, some plants begin producing hormones that trigger bud development, root growth, or flowering. This is why different plants flower at different times in spring. A snowdrop may bloom when the days are barely 10 hours long. A late-flowering tree may wait until days are approaching 16 hours. The sequence of flowering across a spring is a direct reflection of these different photoperiodic thresholds. Animals use similar mechanisms. Birds track day length through photoreceptors in the brain. As days lengthen in late winter and early spring, hormonal changes begin in many bird species. Changes that trigger increased food intake, fat deposition in preparation for migration, changes in territorial behavior, and the development of breeding condition. Mammals also respond to light. The pineal gland, present in most vertebrates, produces melatonin, a hormone whose production is suppressed by light and increases in darkness. In seasonal mammals, changing patterns of melatonin production as day length shifts trigger hormonal cascades that influence reproduction, hibernation, and molting. The connection between light and biology runs through almost every class of animal life. One of the quietest and most gradual events of early spring is the swelling and opening of buds on deciduous trees. A deciduous tree is one that sheds its leaves in autumn and remains leafless through winter. This is not simply a response to cold, it is a prepared dormancy, a state the tree enters deliberately in response to shortening days in autumn, well before the first hard frost. The tree does not merely lose its leaves because they die in cold weather. It actively withdraws nutrients from them, deposits them in the woody tissues, and then abscisses the leaves, sealing off the point of attachment and releasing them cleanly. What remains at the tip of each twig, through winter, is a bud. Buds are tightly wrapped structures that protect the embryonic leaves and flowers inside them through the cold months. They are covered in overlapping scales, modified leaves hardened and waterproofed, that insulate the tender tissues within. Inside a winter bud, if you were to peel away those scales, you would find the fully formed but miniaturized beginnings of next year's leaves, sometimes even the embryonic flower clusters. Buds require a period of cold, chilling hours before they can break dormancy in spring. This requirement prevents trees from being fooled by a brief warm spell in midwinter. A tree that began to unfurl its leaves in response to a warm week in January, only to be caught by a return of hard frost in February, could lose an entire season's growth. The chilling requirement acts as a safety mechanism, ensuring that dormancy only ends after a sustained period of cold has passed. Once the chilling requirement has been met, the buds become responsive to warmth. As temperatures rise in spring, the bud scales begin to loosen. The tissues inside swell with water. The bud elongates slowly, and then the scales separate, and the first pale, folded leaves begin to emerge. This process, bud break, is one of the phenological markers most closely tracked by ecologists and climate scientists, because its timing shifts measurably in response to long-term temperature trends. The flowers of spring are not simply ornamental. They are the reproductive structures of plants, and their timing is coordinated with extraordinary precision. Early blooming spring wildflowers, wood anemones, trout lilies, trilliums, hepaticas, have a particular strategy. They bloom before the trees above them have leafed out, taking advantage of the sunlight that reaches the forest floor in those brief weeks between snowmelt and canopy closure. Once the trees leaf out and shade the ground, the window for light-dependent growth on the forest floor largely closes. These early wildflowers complete much of their annual growth and reproduction in a window that may be only 4 to 6 weeks long. Some spring flowers open even while snow is still on the ground. The snowdrop, common in European woodlands and gardens, regularly blooms through late snow. The skunk cabbage, native to wetlands of eastern North America and parts of East Asia, is even more remarkable. It generates its own heat through a process called thermogenesis, maintaining a temperature inside its flower structure that may be 10 to 30 degrees warmer than the surrounding air, melting the snow around it and creating a small warm microhabitat that attracts early pollinators. Pollinators in early spring are present, but not abundant. Many bee species have not yet fully emerged. The first insects are often flies, which are more cold-tolerant than bees and active at lower temperatures. Some early blooming flowers have evolved specifically to attract these fly pollinators, often with coloration and scent patterns that mimic the animals on which flies feed or breed. As the season progresses and temperatures rise, more species of bees, beetles, butterflies, and other insects become active. The diversity of pollinators increases, and so does the diversity of flowers that depend on them. Spring unfolds as a sequence of mutually dependent arrivals, flowers opening in coordination with the insects that will pollinate them, a relationship refined across millions of years of coevolution. A temperate, deciduous forest in early spring has a quality that is difficult to describe precisely. It is not quite bare and not yet full. There is a transparency to it. Light reaches places it won't reach again until the following year. The ground layer of a mature deciduous forest is typically in shade for most of the growing season, suppressed by the canopy above. But for a few weeks in spring, the light comes through. The ground is still soft with decomposing leaf litter from autumn. The soil surface may be patchy with last year's leaves, still brown and slowly releasing their nutrients. And rising up through all of it, the first green shoots of the season. Spring ephemerals, the plants that grow, flower, and set seed in this brief window, include some of the most delicate and precisely timed plants in temperate ecosystems. Virginia bluebells, bloodroot, Dutchman's breeches, spring beauty. Each one has evolved to exploit the light window, to grow rapidly, flower quickly, and complete its reproductive cycle before being shut out by the shade of the canopy. The soil at this time is often quite wet. Snowmelt has saturated it, and the trees have not yet begun to transpire water at the rates they will later in the season. Water sits in shallow pools in depressions. Small streams run full. The sound of running water is everywhere in early spring in these forests. The bark of trees is beginning to move water and nutrients again. The vascular system of a deciduous tree shuts down significantly in winter. In very early spring, often before any external sign of growth is visible, the tree begins to move sugars and water from roots to crown. This is the period famous in the maple-producing regions of North America and Japan, when sap runs. Maple sap, which is primarily water with a small percentage of dissolved sugars, moves upward through the sapwood with enough pressure to flow freely from a tap placed in the trunk. The sugar maple, the black maple, and several other species are tapped commercially during this window, which typically lasts only a few weeks before the trees leaf out and the flow diminishes. The movement of sap in spring is driven by a combination of factors that are not entirely simple. During a freeze-thaw cycle, the pattern of cold nights and warm days that characterizes the maple sugaring season, gases within the wood alternately contract and expand. This creates pressure differentials that drive sap movement. When temperatures drop below freezing, water in the xylem, the water-conducting tissue of the tree, begins to freeze, and dissolved carbon dioxide comes out of solution, forming bubbles. When temperatures rise above freezing during the day, these bubbles are reabsorbed, generating negative pressure that draws water up from the roots. The result is a daily pumping action that moves sap upward through the stem. This sap is not the same as the dark, thick substance people sometimes call tree sap. It is almost entirely water, very clear, with a faintly sweet taste from the dissolved sugars, typically sucrose at concentrations around 2 to 3%. To produce maple syrup, large amounts of this sap must be boiled down. It takes roughly 40 liters of sap to produce 1 liter of syrup. The sugars in the sap were manufactured the previous summer through photosynthesis and stored in the woody tissues over winter. In spring, they are mobilized and moved toward the growing tips, where they will fuel the enormous energy expenditure of leafing out. A large deciduous tree produces thousands of new leaves each spring, each one requiring materials and energy that must be supplied from stored reserves before the new leaves become photosynthetically active enough to produce their own. This period of spring growth, fueled entirely by reserves rather than current photosynthesis, is one of the most energy-intensive moments in a tree's annual cycle. It's a kind of biological expenditure, an investment made before any income has arrived. Wetlands occupy a space between the terrestrial and the aquatic, and spring brings changes to both. Vernal pools, shallow, temporary wetlands that fill with water in late winter and spring and dry out by summer, are among the most ecologically interesting features of the spring landscape. They exist in depressions in forest floors, in low-lying fields, in meadows and woodlands across the temperate world. They fill with snowmelt and spring rain, and they are isolated from permanent water bodies, which means they are free of fish. The absence of fish makes vernal pools important breeding habitat for a variety of amphibians. Salamanders that spend most of their lives underground or under leaf litter migrate to vernal pools in early spring, often on the first warm, rainy nights of the year. Wood frogs in North America congregate in vernal pools and begin calling within days of ice melting, sometimes while snow is still present on the ground. Their calls, often described as sounding like ducks or quacking geese, are one of the distinctive sounds of early spring in eastern North American forests. Spotted salamanders, marbled salamanders, Jefferson salamanders, these and other species travel to the same pools year after year, often the pool where they were born. Their navigational ability appears to involve multiple cues: the slope of the terrain, the magnetic field of the earth, olfactory traces. Exactly how amphibians find their breeding pools after spending months far away is still not entirely understood. The eggs laid in these pools must develop and hatch before the pool dries out, which creates a strong selective pressure for rapid development. Wood frog eggs in cold water may take several weeks to hatch. As the water warms, development accelerates. Tadpoles grow and transform into froglets typically within 1 to 2 months, fast enough in most years to leave the water before it disappears. The migration of amphibians to breeding sites in early spring is one of the least observed but most fundamental events in temperate woodland ecology. These animals, frogs, toads, salamanders, spend most of their lives concealed. They overwinter deep in soil or leaf litter or under logs, their metabolic rates reduced to minimal levels. In spring, as temperatures rise and the first warm rains arrive, they emerge and move. The cue for movement in many species is a combination of soil temperature and rainfall. Conditions must be both warm enough and wet enough before the migration begins. For some species, the migration is synchronized to a remarkable degree. In a good spring night, warm temperatures, steady rain, hundreds of spotted salamanders may cross the same stretch of road in a matter of hours, all headed to the same vernal pool. They have been emerging on the same warming nights and traveling to the same pools for generations. The behavior is innate, but it is triggered by precise environmental conditions. Once in the pool, males of many frog and toad species call to attract females. The wood frog's call is notable for its volume relative to the size of the animal. A breeding pool in full chorus can be heard from a considerable distance. The chorus frogs and spring peepers add their voices somewhat later in the spring, as temperatures continue to rise. A progression of frog calls through spring is a reliable and detailed indicator of how the season is advancing. Toads, the American toad in eastern North America, the common toad in Europe, typically breed later in spring than the early tree frogs and wood frogs, waiting for warmer conditions. Their long, musical trills from ponds and flooded fields mark a later stage of spring's progression. Few events are as noticeable to the casual observer as the return of migratory birds in spring. Migration, the seasonal movement of animals between breeding and wintering areas, is practiced by thousands of species of birds, and their movements in spring are among the most dramatic annual redistributions of life on the planet. A single spring migration might involve billions of individual birds moving across continents and oceans, each one following routes shaped by millions of years of natural selection. Not all migratory birds travel equally far. Some species are short-distance migrants, moving only a few hundred kilometers between their winter and summer ranges. Others are long-distance migrants, traveling from the tropics or even the southern hemisphere to breeding grounds in the Arctic or subarctic. The Arctic tern holds the record for the longest migration of any animal. It travels from its Arctic breeding grounds to the Antarctic and back each year, a round trip of roughly 70,000 kilometers. The timing of migration in spring is governed by a combination of day length, temperature, and wind conditions. Many species depart from their wintering grounds on a schedule driven primarily by photoperiod, the lengthening of days, which ensures that they arrive at their breeding grounds at approximately the right time regardless of year-to-year variation in weather. Others are more flexible, adjusting their departure based on local conditions. For the observer on the ground, the return of birds in spring proceeds as a sequence. In temperate North America, the first arrivals, red-winged blackbirds, American robins, eastern bluebirds, may appear in late February or early March in the southern parts of their range, while the ground is still frozen. These early arrivals often precede the bulk of the spring migration by weeks. As March and April progress, wave after wave of migrants pass through. Sparrows, warblers, thrushes, flycatchers, each family has its own schedule, its own ecological niche, its own relationship with the available food. Wood warblers arrive when insects are hatching. Swallows follow the emergence of flying insects over water. The timing, in many cases, is exquisitely matched to the food supply. The navigational abilities of migratory birds remain one of the more remarkable topics in animal biology. A small songbird weighing 10 grams, a blackpoll warbler, for example, may fly non-stop from the coast of New England to South America in autumn, covering more than 2,500 kilometers over open ocean in a flight lasting several days without rest or food. In spring, it returns, finding its way back to the same woods, sometimes the same territory, where it bred the previous summer. How does it do this? Birds use multiple navigational cues. During the day, they navigate using the position of the sun, adjusting for the time of day using an internal circadian clock. At night, they navigate using the stars, specifically the pattern of stellar rotation around the celestial pole, which indicates the direction of true north. They also detect the Earth's magnetic field using magnetite crystals in the beak or specialized photoreceptors in the eye that allow them to visualize magnetic field lines. Landmarks, odors, and infrasounds, low-frequency sounds too low for humans to hear, may also play roles in orientation. A young bird migrating for the first time has no learned route. It carries within its genome a directional tendency and a travel distance, a kind of inherited itinerary. If it survives its first migration, subsequent journeys can be refined by experience, by learning landmarks along the route, by following other individuals. The result of all these mechanisms is a system of remarkable reliability. Millions of birds make their spring journeys each year, arriving at breeding grounds that are in some cases identical to where they bred before, sometimes to the same tree, the same nest site, the same territory. The emergence of insects in spring is a process that, if one pays attention to it, reveals itself to be elaborate and precisely sequenced. Insects overwinter in a variety of ways depending on the species. Some pass the winter as eggs, hardy, cold-resistant structures that contain the embryo in a suspended state. Some overwinter as larvae, buried in soil or leaf litter or submerged in stream sediment, feeding slowly or not at all through the cold months. Some overwinter as pupae, their metamorphosis paused and waiting for the right conditions to complete. And some overwinter as adults. The familiar sight of a morning cloak butterfly appearing on a warm February day in North America is possible because the adult form of this species is freeze-tolerant and can survive beneath bark or in leaf litter through winter temperatures. Each of these strategies comes with different timing implications. Insects that overwinter as adults are typically the first to become active, since they require only warmth to resume activity. Species that overwinter as larvae or pupae must complete additional development before becoming active, and this takes time even after temperatures rise. The emergence of aquatic insects from the streams and rivers, where they have spent the winter as larvae, is one of the defining events of early spring in riparian habitats. Stoneflies, a group of insects that spend their larval stages in cold, well-oxygenated streams, often emerge as adults in late winter and early spring. Early stonefly adults are sometimes seen walking on snow near streams in February. Their emergence is a signal to trout, which begin feeding actively in early spring, and to the fish-eating birds, kingfishers, mergansers, dippers, that follow the fish. As spring advances and temperatures rise further, mayflies begin to emerge. The mass emergence of mayflies, a phenomenon that sometimes involves millions of individuals rising from a river simultaneously, is among the more spectacular biological events of the season, and it drives intense feeding activity by fish and birds. Bees are central to the ecology of spring flowering, and their emergence and the flowering of plants are tightly linked. Honeybees, which are not solitary but live in colonies, do not truly hibernate. They overwinter as a cluster inside their hive, generating warmth collectively and living off stores of honey accumulated the previous autumn. As temperatures rise and the first flowers bloom in spring, worker bees begin to venture out on cleaner days to forage. The first pollen loads of spring, often from willow catkins, which are among the earliest large pollen sources, are visible as bright yellow or orange patches on the corbiculae of returning workers. Bumblebees follow a different strategy. Only the queen overwinters, having mated in autumn and spent the winter buried in the soil. In early spring, the queen emerges, feeds on early flowers to build up her energy reserves, and then seeks out a suitable nest site, often an abandoned rodent burrow. She raises the first small cohort of workers herself, and these workers gradually take over the colony's foraging as the season advances. Solitary bees, which make up the majority of bee species worldwide, emerge at a variety of times in spring. Many are synchronized with the bloom times of specific plant species on which they are particularly dependent. The mason bees, which emerge relatively early in spring, are often the first solitary bees seen visiting flowers. Mining bees, leafcutter bees, and many others emerge progressively later in the season as temperatures continue to rise. The network of interactions between bees and flowers is not simply one-to-one. A single flower species may be visited by dozens of bee species. A single bee species may forage from dozens of plant species. But within this general network, there are specific dependencies, specialist relationships in which a bee species has evolved to preferentially or exclusively forage from a particular plant genus or family. These specialist relationships can make certain bee species particularly vulnerable to the loss of their host plants, and they also mean that the timing of flowering and bee emergence must remain reasonably synchronized. Spring in the grasslands and open country of the world has a different character than spring in the forest. Temperate grasslands, the prairies of North America, the steppes of Eurasia, the pampas of South America, are seasonally dry environments dominated by grasses and forbs. The growing season is concentrated, and spring is its beginning. When winter releases its hold and moisture is available, grasses begin to grow with unusual speed. A grass plant, unlike a tree, regrows from the base, from protected meristematic tissue close to the ground, so it can begin adding new leaf tissue immediately when conditions allow, without waiting for buds to swell and break. The greening of grasslands in spring is rapid. In temperate prairie, a landscape that was brown and flat in February can be producing lush green growth by April. The new grass is palatable and nutritious, high in protein and moisture, and it attracts the grazing animals that depend on the grassland. Bison in North America historically moved northward following the spring flush of new grass, a kind of migration that tracked the seasonal wave of growth. Wildebeest in Africa follow the same pattern in their famous annual movements. Spring in open grasslands is also a season of wind. Without the trees that break wind in forested landscapes, the spring air in open country has a constant presence. The grasses bend and move in continuous waves. The sky is enormous. Spring wildflowers in the grassland, camas, shooting star, prairie smoke, blue-eyed grass, emerge among the green growth, often brilliantly colored, their petals catching the constant light. Spring at high latitudes arrives late but with unusual intensity. In the Arctic and subarctic, winter is long and severe. The sun disappears entirely for weeks or months at the highest latitudes. The landscape is locked in snow and ice. When spring finally arrives, compressed into a shorter period than in the temperate zones, it unfolds rapidly. Days lengthen quickly near the poles because of the geometry of the Earth's tilt, and the increase in day length in spring is faster at high latitudes than at lower ones. At the Arctic Circle, the change from 18 hours of daylight to 24 hours of daylight at the summer solstice occurs in just a few months. This compressed spring drives a compressed but intense burst of biological activity. Migratory birds pour into the Arctic in spring. Millions of shorebirds, ducks, geese, songbirds, raptors, to breed in the tundra and taiga while food is briefly abundant and the days are endlessly long. The productivity of Arctic ecosystems in summer, fueled by continuous daylight, is sufficient to support this enormous annual pulse of life. Tundra plants respond to the brief growing season with strategies unlike those of temperate species. Many are low-growing and cushion-forming, reducing their exposure to wind and taking advantage of the heat that accumulates in the layer immediately above dark-colored soil. Some Arctic wildflowers are capable of tracking the sun, rotating their bowl-shaped flowers to face it throughout the day, concentrating solar warmth on their reproductive organs to speed seed development. Caribou and reindeer undertake some of the longest land migrations of any mammal, moving from forested wintering areas to open tundra calving grounds in spring. The calf arrives on the tundra just as the first new vegetation is emerging, timing that ensures the cow has access to the most nutritious new growth to sustain milk production. It's worth pausing to note that the seasons in the southern hemisphere are reversed from those in the northern hemisphere. When the northern hemisphere tilts toward the sun during the northern summer, the southern hemisphere tilts away, and vice versa. This means that spring in the southern hemisphere occurs while the northern hemisphere is experiencing autumn, roughly from September to November. September in South Africa, in southern Australia, in Argentina and Chile, carries the quality of spring that March and April carry in Europe and North America. This reversal has ecological consequences that can be non-obvious. Migratory birds that breed in the Arctic during the northern summer then travel south to spend the northern winter, arriving in the southern hemisphere during its spring. Arctic terns and many shorebird species effectively experience two springs each year: breeding season in the Arctic, followed by spring in the southern hemisphere when they arrive there as it warms. Southern hemisphere springs have their own distinctive character. The Cape Floristic region of South Africa, for example, harbors one of the world's most diverse assemblages of flowering plants, many of them blooming in the southern spring. The Australian spring brings wildflowers to the sandplain heaths of Western Australia on a scale that rivals anything in the temperate world. The Patagonian steppe greens and the Andes release their snowmelt into the rivers of Chile and Argentina. In temperate New Zealand, spring brings the tuae and the kaka back to flowering trees. In the Southern Ocean, spring means the return of light to feeding grounds that were dark for months, and the explosion of phytoplankton that begins the food chain supporting seabirds, seals, penguins, and whales. The study of the timing of recurring natural events and their relationships to seasonal changes is called phenology. Phenological records, observations of first flower dates, first migratory arrivals, ice-out dates on lakes, first frog calls of the year, have been kept in various places for centuries. Some Japanese records of cherry blossom dates extend back more than 1,000 years. European records of grape harvest dates, which correlate with spring and summer temperatures, go back several centuries in some regions. These long records provide an invaluable window into how the timing of spring has shifted over time. Modern phenological networks, organized groups of observers recording standardized observations across wide geographic areas, allow scientists to track spring's arrival across entire landscapes in near real time. The USA National Phenology Network, the Pan-European Phenology Project, and comparable organizations in other countries compile tens of thousands of observations each spring, building a detailed picture of when and where biological spring is occurring. These records reveal that the timing of many spring events has shifted in recent decades. Cherry blossoms in Japan now reach peak bloom earlier in the year than they did 50 years ago. First arrival dates for many migratory bird species in Europe and North America have moved earlier. The timing of bud break in deciduous trees has shifted. These shifts are generally consistent with warming temperatures and are studied as indicators of the broader effects of climate change on natural systems. The study of phenology also reveals interesting mismatches, cases where the timing of interdependent events has shifted at different rates, so that a species' behavior is no longer synchronized with the food it depends on. If caterpillars hatch earlier in spring in response to warming, but the birds that feed their chicks on caterpillars still arrive on a schedule governed by day length rather than temperature, the birds may arrive after peak caterpillar availability. These mismatches are an active area of ecological research. Among the most widely recognized symbols of spring in the world is the cherry blossom. Flowering cherry trees, primarily of the genus Prunus, bloom in early to mid-spring across much of the temperate northern hemisphere. The timing varies by location and by the specific variety. In Washington, D.C., peak bloom of the famous Yoshino cherry trees typically falls in late March or early April. In Tokyo, cherry blossom season usually runs from late March into early April. In northern Japan, the blossoms arrive weeks later, in late April or May. In Japan, the arrival of cherry blossoms is the occasion of a tradition called hanami, flower viewing, in which people gather under the trees, often in large numbers, to observe and appreciate the brief display. The tradition has roots at least 1,000 years deep in Japanese culture. The brevity of cherry blossom season. A fully bloomed tree may drop its petals within 2 weeks, accelerated by rain or wind, has long been associated in Japanese aesthetics with the concept of mono no aware, a gentle awareness of impermanence. Other cultures have their spring flowers that serve similar roles. The daffodil in Britain is so closely associated with spring that its appearance is reported in national newspapers. The tulip in the Netherlands, which blooms in April, draws visitors from across the world to the Keukenhof and to the bulb fields of the Bollenstreek. The magnolia, the dogwood, the redbud, in eastern North America. These ornamental and native trees mark the progression of spring with flowers that appear before or alongside the first leaves. The cultural weight carried by spring flowers reflects something genuine about how profoundly the return of warmth and light affects human experience. This connection is ancient and widespread. Spring is closely associated with rain in many parts of the world, and rain in spring has a particular quality. The increased precipitation of spring comes from several sources. Frontal systems become more active as cold air masses from winter still linger over the continents while warm, moist air begins to push in from warmer regions. The collision of these air masses produces the squall lines, thunderstorms, and multi-day rain events that characterize spring weather in much of the mid-latitudes. The rain falls on thawing ground, on newly opened soil, on last year's leaf litter, and it produces a smell that is recognizable to most people in temperate climates. The earthy, slightly sweet, almost mineral scent associated with rain on dry soil. This smell has a name, petrichor, from the Greek words for stone and the fluid that flows in the veins of the gods. It is produced primarily by two compounds: geosmin, which is a byproduct of soil bacteria called actinomycetes, and a combination of plant oils that have accumulated in dry soil and are released when rain falls. Geosmin is detectable by the human nose at extraordinarily low concentrations, a few parts per trillion. The human olfactory system's sensitivity to this compound is thought by some researchers to reflect an evolutionary connection to the ancestral importance of finding water during dry periods. The smell of rain on soil may carry deep biological significance as a signal of water availability. Spring rain is also the beginning of the growing season for many plants. The combination of lengthening days, warming temperatures, and adequate moisture allows photosynthesis to proceed at its full potential. In many temperate regions, spring is the wettest season, and this moisture is fundamental to the green abundance that characterizes the season. Along coastlines, spring brings changes that are not always visible from the land. The tidal ranges of spring are often larger than those of other seasons, not because of the astronomical spring equinox directly, but because of the increased frequency of spring tides, which are the maximum tidal ranges that occur when the sun and moon are aligned, amplifying each other's gravitational pull on the oceans. These spring tides occur twice a month throughout the year, but the coincidence of high spring tides with spring weather and seasonal biological cycles makes them particularly significant in coastal ecosystems. In temperate coastal zones, spring is marked by the greening of intertidal zones. Seaweeds and marine algae respond to increasing light with rapid growth. Kelp forests, which may have been damaged by winter storms, begin to regenerate. The rockweed and bladderwrack of northern shores produce new fronds. Green algae spread rapidly in the shallow intertidal zone where light is abundant. Rocky intertidal communities, the assemblages of barnacles, mussels, whelks, sea stars, and other invertebrates that live in the zone between the highest and lowest tides, undergo seasonal changes in activity and reproduction. Many intertidal invertebrates reproduce in spring, releasing larvae into the water column, where they drift as plankton before settling and metamorphosing into the adult form. The spring plankton bloom in offshore waters provides food for these larvae and sets the stage for the entire summer's coastal ecology. The spring transition in the ocean is one of the most important biological events on the planet, though it occurs largely out of sight. In temperate and high-latitude oceans, winter is characterized by deep vertical mixing of the water column. Cold, dense surface water sinks, and the surface layer is continuously disrupted by storms. This mixing distributes nutrients throughout the water column but also keeps phytoplankton, the microscopic photosynthetic organisms at the base of the marine food web, deep in the water column where light is insufficient for photosynthesis. As spring arrives and storms diminish, the surface water warms slightly and becomes less dense. A stable, stratified layer develops near the surface, a warm surface layer sitting on top of denser, colder water below. This stratification prevents the mixing that characterized winter. The phytoplankton, now trapped in the well-lit surface layer with abundant nutrients carried up from below during winter, begin to grow explosively. This is the spring phytoplankton bloom. It can occur within days once conditions are right, a sudden greening of the surface ocean visible from satellite imagery. The bloom is one of the most significant biological events on Earth, producing roughly half of all the oxygen in the planet's atmosphere over the course of a year. It is the foundation on which the entire ocean food web rests during the productive season. Zooplankton, tiny animals including copepods, krill, and the larvae of larger animals, respond rapidly to the phytoplankton bloom. Their populations grow as they graze on the abundant phytoplankton. Fish that feed on zooplankton follow. Seabirds and marine mammals follow in turn. The spring bloom in the ocean initiates a cascade of productivity that drives the entire summer season. Spring brings changes to the behavior and condition of large terrestrial mammals. For many ungulates, deer, elk, moose, wild sheep, bison, spring is a period of recovery. Winter is a time of energy deficit. Forage is scarce or inaccessible. Body fat reserves accumulated in autumn are drawn down steadily through the cold months. By late winter, many large herbivores are in poor body condition. Thin, their metabolism reduced, often concentrated on south-facing slopes or in valleys where forage is most accessible. When spring arrives and new vegetation begins to emerge, these animals shift quickly to taking advantage of the flush of new growth. New grass and new forbs are highly digestible and rich in protein, very different from the dry, fibrous material available in winter. Animals that can track the leading edge of spring growth, moving upslope or northward as the season advances, gain access to a continuous supply of the most nutritious vegetation. This is the basis of the elevational migrations observed in deer and elk in mountainous regions, a progressive movement to higher elevations as the spring green-up follows the retreating snowline. Females carrying young through winter are under particular pressure, and spring nutrition is critical to their recovery and to milk production if they are nursing. In most northern ungulates, young are born in spring, time to take advantage of the flush of new vegetation that supports milk production. Deer fawns, elk calves, and moose calves are typically born in May or June in the northern hemisphere, entering a world where food is rapidly becoming abundant. The emergence of bears from winter dens is one of the more closely watched events of spring in regions where bears are present. Bears in temperate and boreal regions enter a state of dormancy in late autumn, a state that is physiologically distinct from the deep hibernation of smaller animals like ground squirrels, but that nonetheless involves a significant reduction in metabolic rate, heart rate, body temperature, and overall activity. A hibernating black bear may not eat, drink, defecate, or urinate for 4 to 7 months. It lives entirely off stored body fat. The timing of emergence depends on the severity of winter and the location. In the southern parts of their range, where winters are mild, some bears, particularly adult males, may not enter dens at all or may do so only briefly. In the northern parts of their range, bears may spend 5 or 6 months in dens. Female bears with newborn cubs are typically the last to emerge. Cubs are born in the den in late January or early February, very small, blind, and dependent entirely on the mother. They grow rapidly on fat-rich milk during the remaining weeks in the den. When the family emerges in spring, the cubs are still quite small but mobile, following the mother as she begins foraging for the season's first food. Early spring foraging for bears focuses on high-calorie, easily digestible items. Emerging horsetails, spring beauties, clover, and dandelions are important early foods. Along streams, bears forage for fish. In some regions, spring runoff brings early spawning fish into accessible locations. Carrion, animals that did not survive the winter, is another important early season food source. Spring for birds is primarily a reproductive season. The physiological changes that begin with increasing day length in late winter culminate in the full expression of breeding behavior in spring. Song is among the most notable of these behaviors. In temperate regions, the dawn chorus, the collective singing of many bird species in the hours around sunrise, is at its most intense in spring. Each species sings its own song, and for many, song serves multiple functions simultaneously. It advertises territorial ownership to rival males and announces the singer's presence and fitness to potential mates. The complexity and quality of a bird's song can communicate information about its health, its age, and its experience. Older, more experienced males in many species sing more elaborate or more sustained songs than younger males. Females in many songbird species assess potential mates partly on the basis of song. Nest construction in spring is an activity that ranges from the remarkably simple to the astonishingly complex. Some species, the killdeer for example, lay their eggs in a shallow scrape on bare ground with little or no added material. Others construct elaborate structures. The pendulous, woven nests of Baltimore orioles, the deep cup nests of American robins lined with mud and fine grasses, the enormous platform nests of bald eagles added to year after year until they may weigh hundreds of kilograms. The timing of nesting is closely tied to the availability of food for the chicks. Insectivorous species time their clutch laying so that the peak energy demand of chick feeding coincides with peak insect abundance. In temperate Europe, this is the period of caterpillar emergence from oak leaves, a narrow window of extraordinary food availability that great tits and many other forest birds have evolved to match with precision. The dawn chorus deserves a section of its own, because it is one of the most remarkable acoustic phenomena of the spring landscape. In temperate forests, the chorus begins before the sun rises, in the deepest, quietest part of the early morning. The first birds to sing are typically those with large eyes that allow them to see in lower light. Robins and thrushes in Europe, robins and with thrushes in North America, blackbirds and song thrushes. They begin while it is still largely dark. As light increases, more species add their voices. The intensity and complexity of the chorus build through the hour around sunrise, then gradually diminish as morning progresses and the birds shift from singing to foraging. By mid-morning, the chorus has largely subsided, replaced by the more scattered calls and songs of daily activity. Why do birds sing so intensely at dawn? Several explanations have been proposed. Light at dawn is too dim for effective foraging but bright enough for vocal communication. So birds may use this window for song rather than wasting it in silence. Acoustic conditions at dawn are also favorable. The air is typically calm and cold, which carries sound farther and with less distortion than the turbulent, warm air of midday. Some research suggests that dawn song may be used to reassert territorial boundaries after a night during which anything might have happened. The dawn chorus is loudest and most diverse in late April and May in the northern hemisphere, when the maximum number of species is present and breeding activity is at its peak. A good spring morning in a woodland with a mix of habitat types can produce songs from dozens of species in the space of an hour. To an attentive listener, it is a landscape described entirely in sound. While the dawn chorus is what most people notice, much of the spring bird migration actually occurs at night. Many songbirds, which migrate by day in their normal life, fly at night during migration. The reasons appear to include reduced predation risk. Hawks and falcons that pursue songbirds are largely diurnal, and access to better navigational cues. The stars, which provide reliable directional information, are only visible at night. Flying at night also allows birds to forage and rest during the day, recovering energy depleted in the previous night's flight. Nocturnal migrants fly at considerable altitudes, often between 500 and 2,000 meters above the ground. Weather radar, which detects the movement of objects in the atmosphere, shows the passage of these migrations with remarkable clarity on favorable spring nights. Large rings of radar echoes expanding outward from weather stations mark the emergence of millions of birds from a period of rest as conditions improve. On peak migration nights, the total volume of birds in the air over North America or Europe can be in the hundreds of millions. These birds call as they fly. The flight calls of nocturnal migrants, brief, often simple notes given periodically during the night flight, are distinct from the songs given during the breeding season. With practice, many species can be identified by their flight calls. The sounds of nocturnal migration are audible on clear spring nights when birds are moving, a thin, high collection of calls drifting down from the darkness overhead. Spring weather is notoriously variable, and this variability has ecological consequences. In the northern hemisphere, spring is a transitional period in the large-scale atmospheric circulation. The strongly zonal, westerly wind patterns of winter begin to break down. The temperature gradient between the Arctic and the tropics weakens as the Arctic warms faster than the tropics in spring. This weakening of the temperature gradient reduces the energy that drives the jet stream, and the jet stream, that narrow band of fast-moving air at high altitude that guides weather systems, tends to become more wavy and slow-moving. This means spring weather is more erratic than summer or winter weather. Cold Arctic air masses can push southward through weak spots in the jet stream, bringing late snows and frosts to mid-latitude regions well into April. Conversely, warm subtropical air can surge northward through troughs in the jet stream, delivering unusually warm temperatures early in the season. These temperature swings have ecological consequences. A cold snap after early bud break can damage the newly open leaves of trees and the early flowers of spring plants. A sustained warm period in early spring can cause insects to emerge early, only to have their population crashed by a return of cold. Spring weather imposes a constant test of timing and resilience on biological systems, and the organisms that handle it best are generally those with some flexibility in their timing, those that can respond to actual conditions rather than being locked into a rigid calendar. Thunderstorms are the most dramatic feature of spring weather in many parts of the world. The instability produced by cold air aloft meeting warm, moist air near the surface creates the convective energy that drives thunderstorm development. Spring thunderstorms are a normal and important part of the water cycle, delivering rain to landscapes that need it and, through lightning, fixing small amounts of atmospheric nitrogen into the soil. Spring transforms rivers. A river is not a static feature. It is a dynamic system that responds continuously to rainfall, snowmelt, temperature, and the condition of the surrounding landscape. In spring, rivers in temperate regions are typically at or near their highest flow levels of the year. Snowmelt from the watershed adds to rainfall, and the still cold ground in early spring absorbs water more slowly than it will later in the season. High spring flows change rivers physically. Fast-moving water carries more sediment. The velocity of the current determines what size particles can be kept in suspension. A river in spring flood may be brown and opaque with suspended sediment scoured from the streambed and eroded from banks. The sediment carried by rivers in spring is eventually deposited on floodplains during high water events, building the fertile alluvial soils that have supported human agriculture for millennia along the great river valleys. For the animals that live in rivers, spring flow has multiple effects. Migratory fish, salmon, trout, shad, alewife, and many others use spring high flows as a cue for upstream movement. High, cold water carries dissolved oxygen, which these fish require. The freshwater current that pushes out into the estuary attracts the fish, and the scent of the home river guides them to the tributaries where they hatched. River otters raise their young in spring, and the high fish productivity of spring rivers supports this timing. Beavers increase their activity in spring as they repair and expand dams and lodges, and their construction activity itself shapes the hydrology of the streams they inhabit, creating pond environments that slow water, raise water tables, and create wetland habitat. The spawning behavior of freshwater fish in spring is one of the less observed but ecologically important events of the season. Most temperate freshwater fish breed in spring, when water temperatures reach species-specific thresholds that trigger reproductive behavior. The precise temperature required varies. Some cold water species like brook trout spawn in the fall, but many others, largemouth bass, bluegill, yellow perch, northern pike, and various members of the carp family, spawn in spring as water temperatures climb from the cold levels of winter. Yellow perch in North American lakes spawn in early spring, among the first fish to spawn in the season, when water temperatures are barely above freezing. Females deposit long, accordion-folded strings of eggs draped over submerged vegetation or woody debris. The spawn happens quickly, often within a few days, and the adults then disperse. The eggs develop over several weeks, and the larvae that hatch must find and consume tiny zooplankton almost immediately to survive. In contrast, largemouth bass spawn later in spring, when water is warmer. Male bass construct nests by fanning depressions in the substrate with their fins, then guard the eggs and newly hatched fry with notable persistence. The male may remain on the nest for several weeks, driving away potential predators. This investment of parental care is relatively unusual among fish. Northern pike, which are large predatory fish, spawn very early in spring, often in flooded marginal areas while ice is still present in deeper water. They deposit their adhesive eggs over submerged vegetation in shallow, sun-warmed bays. The larvae hatch and attach to vegetation by a sticky organ on their snout before becoming free-swimming. Below the surface of the spring landscape, invisible to most observers, an enormous amount of biological activity is increasing rapidly. Soil bacteria, which are the primary decomposers of organic matter in most terrestrial ecosystems, dramatically increase their activity as soil temperature rises. A soil that was largely inert at 2 or 3 degrees Celsius becomes intensely active at 10 or 15 degrees. The decomposition of organic matter releases nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and trace elements into a form that plant roots can absorb. Spring's warming soil is the engine of plant nutrition. Fungi, which form extensive networks of hyphae through the soil, play a role in this nutrient cycling as well. Many fungi form mycorrhizal associations with plant roots, symbiotic relationships in which the fungus provides water and nutrients to the plant in exchange for sugars produced by photosynthesis. These associations are enormously important to plant growth. Most terrestrial plant species have mycorrhizal partners, and many could not grow in their natural soils without them. In spring, mycorrhizal networks are reactivated as both the host plants and the fungi respond to warming. The network is not simply a connection between one plant and one fungus. It is often a web connecting many plants of the same or different species through a shared fungal network. This wood wide web, as it has been called in popular literature, allows carbon and nutrients to move between plants in ways that are not yet fully understood. Earthworms, which are among the most visible soil organisms, increase their activity dramatically in spring. They move closer to the soil surface as it warms, processing organic material, aerating the soil, and producing castings that are rich in available nutrients. The classic image of robins pulling worms from the soil in spring is an accurate one. Worm availability near the surface increases greatly in the damp, warm conditions of early spring. A deciduous tree in spring undergoes a transformation that, if observed closely over several weeks, is remarkable in its completeness. In early spring, March, in many temperate areas, the tree stands leafless. Its form is defined entirely by its branching structure, the pattern of major limbs and minor twigs that has developed over years or decades of growth. In late afternoon light, the fine twig structure of a large dormant tree creates an intricate tracery against the sky. As the weeks pass, the buds begin to swell. The change is subtle at first, a slight plumpness to what was previously a flat scale. Then color begins to appear, the red-purple of maple buds, the sticky yellow-green of horse chestnut buds, the pale green of beech. The progress is so gradual that it requires actual attention to notice from day to day, but over a period of weeks it is unmistakable. The leaves, when they finally emerge, are folded and compressed within the bud. They unfurl slowly, reaching their full size over a week or two. New leaves are often soft and pale, a lighter, more yellow-green than they will be later in the season when the chloroplasts are fully developed and the leaf structure has hardened. They may carry a faint reddish or bronze tinge from anthocyanins, which some researchers believe may protect the fragile young leaf tissue from excess light. As spring turns toward early summer, the canopy closes. Individual trees, which were distinct through winter, merge into a continuous green mass. The light-filled spring woodland becomes a shaded summer forest. The flowering understory plants have already set their seed and are beginning their post-reproductive decline. The forest has entered its summer mode, a complex engine of photosynthesis, water movement, and gas exchange operating at full capacity. Spring arrives to the senses before it fully arrives to the thermometer. The smell of thawing ground is one of the earliest signals. As soil surfaces begin to warm and microbial activity increases, gases produced by decomposition, including geosmin and various volatile organic compounds, diffuse upward through the soil surface and into the air. The smell of earth, of wet leaves composting, of fungi growing through dead wood. These are the olfactory signature of early spring, present even on cold days when nothing appears to be growing. Water sounds increase in spring. Streams that were running slowly or quietly under ice become vocal. The drip of melting snow from rooftops and branches, the trickle of water moving across still frozen ground, the rush of a stream in full spring spate. Water announces itself through the season. In woodland habitats, the increase in water sounds coincides almost exactly with the increase in birdsong, creating an acoustic environment of unusual richness. The light itself changes. Even before the air is warm, the quality of spring light is different from winter light. It has a clarity and a directness that winter light, filtered through more atmosphere at a lower angle, does not have. Shadows are sharper. Colors are more vivid. The pale green of new leaves against a clear sky in April has a quality that painters have tried to capture for centuries. The feel of spring air, still cool enough to be bracing, but no longer carrying the sting of winter cold, is something many people recognize immediately. The damp coolness of a spring morning, the way air freshly washed by overnight rain carries the mixed sense of soil and vegetation, is distinct from any other season. It has a freshness that summer air, once the heat arrives and the green has matured, will not have again until the following year. Some of the most biologically productive places in any landscape are the transition zones between different habitats. The edges where forest meets field, where upland meets wetland, where stream corridor meets hillside. These edge habitats tend to have higher species diversity than either of the adjacent habitat types because they offer conditions from both. A bird species that requires open foraging areas and dense shrubby cover for nesting can find both within a short distance in an edge habitat. A plant that needs good soil moisture but also full sun may find those conditions at the edge of a woodland where the canopy has opened. In spring, edge habitats often show the season's changes first and most dramatically. The shrubs and small trees that dominate many edge environments, hawthorn, wild rose, elderberry, dogwood, tend to leaf out and flower early, benefiting from the sunlight and warmth absorbed by the dark soil of adjacent open areas. The first wildflowers of spring often appear at these edges. The first butterflies of the season are often seen here, warming themselves on south-facing slopes where the edge environment acts as a sun trap. Hedgerows in the agricultural landscapes of Europe are a well-studied example of this kind of edge habitat. A well-established hedgerow, a linear strip of shrubs and small trees growing along a field boundary, supports a community of plants, invertebrates, birds, and small mammals that is disproportionately diverse relative to its physical extent. In spring, hedgerows come into leaf earlier than the surrounding trees and are among the first places where nesting begins. The specificity of some insect-plant relationships is one of the more striking features of spring ecology. Many butterfly species are closely associated with particular larval food plants, the plants on which the caterpillars feed. A female butterfly selects where to lay her eggs based largely on the presence and condition of the correct host plant. The eggs hatch when the plant is at the right stage of growth, typically just as new leaves are appearing, since new leaves are the most digestible and nutritious. The monarch butterfly is perhaps the most famous example of a species with a specific plant association. Its caterpillars feed exclusively on milkweed, and the species' spring migration northward through North America tracks the emergence of milkweed as the season advances. The monarch moves north in stages, ovipositing on milkweed as it becomes available, with each generation moving farther north as the season progresses. But the monarch story is unusual in its scale. Thousands of less noticed butterfly and moth species follow similar patterns, their seasonal presence determined by the availability of their specific host plants. The spicebush swallowtail depends on spicebush and sassafras. The pearl crescent depends on asters. The Baltimore checkerspot depends on turtlehead. These associations, developed over evolutionary time, mean that the presence of the butterfly in a landscape is contingent on the presence of the plant, and the plant's phenology determines the timing of the butterfly's activity. Spring is a season of wind, and wind is a primary vehicle for the dispersal of plant reproductive material. Before most insect-pollinated flowers have even opened, the wind-pollinated trees of temperate forests are already releasing pollen. Alders, hazels, birches, poplars, willows, and oaks all rely on wind for pollen transfer. These trees flower before their leaves emerge, a timing that is not coincidental. A leafless tree presents no obstacle to wind moving through the canopy, allowing pollen to travel unimpeded from one tree to the next. A tree full of leaves would intercept and block much of this wind-carried pollen. The pollen released by wind-pollinated trees is produced in extraordinary quantities. A single catkin, the elongated, pendulous flower cluster of a hazel or alder, can release millions of pollen grains. A single tree may produce billions. The pollen of alder and birch is light enough to be carried hundreds of kilometers by wind under the right conditions, and it accumulates in visible yellow-green drifts on the surfaces of ponds and puddles. Later in spring and into early summer, wind assists in seed dispersal as well. The seeds of maple trees are equipped with wing-like structures, samaras, that cause them to auto-rotate as they fall, slowing their descent and giving the wind time to carry them away from the parent tree. Elm seeds are surrounded by a papery disc. Cottonwood seeds are attached to long, fine hairs that form a dense, almost cotton-like mass. The fluff that drifts in great white clouds through air in late spring near streams and rivers where cottonwoods grow. Dandelion seeds, familiar to most people as the globe-shaped seed heads that children blow apart, each carry their own tiny parachute, a pappus of fine radiating hairs that allows them to remain airborne in the lightest breeze. The floor of a temperate deciduous forest changes dramatically through spring, and the changes can be observed closely simply by spending time in the same place at weekly intervals. In late winter, before any growth has begun, the forest floor is a layer of last year's leaves, compacted and wet, with here and there the remains of the year before visible underneath. Darker, more decomposed, on its way to becoming the humus layer. The soil surface is exposed between the leaves. Small twigs and branches that fell through the winter lie on top of the leaf litter, not yet begun their slow return to the soil. By early spring, the first changes appear. The moss on fallen logs and stones brightens to an intense green. Mosses are among the first plants to respond to spring warmth and moisture. The tips of ferns begin to push up, tightly rolled, not yet unfurled. The earliest spring ephemerals push through the leaf litter, hepatica, whose small flowers open while the leaves are still huddled close to the ground, and Dutchman's breeches, whose delicate dissected leaves appear in patches of humus. By mid-spring, the floor has transformed. There is green everywhere. Spring ephemerals are in flower or already past it. Trilliums are open. Wood anemones have spread across patches of the ground. Ramps, wild garlic, form dense sheets of broad, smooth leaves in moist, rich bottomlands. The smell of soil and of growing plants is everywhere. By late spring, as the canopy closes, the floor enters a different phase. The spring ephemerals begin to yellow and die back, their work done. The understory ferns unfurl to their full height. The shade deepens. A different set of plants, shade-tolerant species that will remain green all summer, are now visible, modest, and green, where the showy spring flowers once dominated. Spring plays out differently depending on how a landscape is structured, how recently it was disturbed, and how far along in the process of ecological succession it sits. Ecological succession is the process by which plant and animal communities change over time in a predictable direction following a disturbance. An abandoned agricultural field, for example, does not immediately become a forest. It passes through stages. First annual weeds, then perennial grasses and forbs, then shrubs, then fast-growing pioneer trees like aspen or birch, then finally, over decades to centuries, a more complex forest dominated by shade-tolerant species. Each stage of this succession has its own characteristic spring community. The early weedy stage is dominated by annual plants that can grow rapidly from seed. Dandelions, mustards, clovers, and these spring wildflowers attract a different community of early-season insects than a mature forest edgewood. The shrubby stage brings nesting birds that require dense shrubby cover. The young forest stage supports yet another community. A landscape that contains multiple stages of succession side by side is typically more biologically diverse than one that is all in the same stage. Spring reveals this diversity most clearly. Each stage of the landscape develops on its own schedule and at its own pace, contributing its particular characters to the whole. The day itself has a different rhythm in spring than in other seasons. Spring dawns are early. At the latitude of Paris, London, or New York, by late April, the sky begins to lighten well before 5 in the morning. The light arrives slowly, first a general brightening of the eastern sky, then the gradual illumination of the landscape, then full daylight. For an observer outdoors before sunrise, there is a sequence of events. The nighttime sounds fade, the birds begin to call. The dew on leaves and grasses catches the first light. The shadows lengthen as the sun clears the horizon. Midday in spring is bright but not yet hot. The sun is high enough by April that its light is direct and strong, capable of warming surfaces quickly, but the air has not yet had time to accumulate the heat that characterizes summer afternoons. There is often a freshness to the midday air in April and May that will be absent by July. Evenings in spring are long. Dusk comes later with each passing day, and the long twilights of late spring evenings are particularly characteristic of the season. The evening chorus of birds, different in character from the dawn chorus, more scattered and irregular, continues for some time after sunset. Bats emerge in early evening, taking advantage of the warmth of the day. In the northern hemisphere, the first fireflies appear in late spring evenings in the eastern forests. The night in spring is cool but not cold. Frost is still possible well into May in many temperate locations, particularly in the early morning hours, when temperatures drop to their daily minimum. The chill of a spring night is lighter than winter cold, less pervasive, less sustained. Spring is not a single phenomenon. It plays out very differently depending on where one is in the world. In the humid continental climate of eastern North America, the climate that covers most of the northeastern United States and southeastern Canada, spring is a genuine seasonal transition, with cold winters giving way to warm summers. The spring transition is variable. Mild weeks can alternate with late cold spells, and frost can occur as late as May in many areas. In the oceanic climate of northwestern Europe, Britain, Ireland, Norway, parts of France and Germany, spring is more prolonged and mild. Winters are rarely severe, and the transition to summer is gradual. Spring flowers bloom over a longer period. Swallows and cuckoos arrive in April and May as the season slowly advances. The sea, which moderates the climate, ensures that extreme cold snaps are rare even in winter, but also that spring warmth comes slowly. In the Mediterranean climate of southern Europe, California, and similar regions around the world, the seasonal rhythm is different entirely. Here, the dry season is summer, not winter. Spring is the period of greatest green. Rains have kept the landscape wet through winter and early spring, and the spring wildflower display before the summer drought begins can be extraordinary. By late spring and early summer, the landscape is browning as the dry season takes hold. In continental climates, the interior of North America, the Great Steppes of Central Asia, spring is abrupt. Winters are long and cold, and the transition to spring can come suddenly, with weeks of cold giving way to rapid warmth in March or April. The spring thaw in these climates can be sudden and intense, producing rapid snowmelt and flooding. In some ecosystems, fire is a natural part of the spring landscape. Many fire-adapted ecosystems, grasslands, savannas, Mediterranean shrublands, longleaf pine forests, historically burned at regular intervals, often in spring and early summer before the growing season fully begins. These fires were started by lightning, and in some regions by indigenous peoples who used fire as a land management tool. Spring fires in grasslands burn quickly through dry winter grass, consuming the standing dead material that has accumulated since the previous growing season. The fire is intense but brief. The soil surface may be blackened, and the standing dead grass and litter are consumed. But the growing points of grasses, at the base of the plant protected by the soil, are unharmed. Within days of a spring fire, new green growth emerges through the black ash. The ash itself returns nutrients to the soil. The charred surface absorbs heat more rapidly than unburned ground, warming the soil and accelerating early growth. Prescribed burning, the deliberate use of fire by land managers to mimic the natural fire cycle, is now widely used as a conservation tool in fire-adapted ecosystems. Spring burns in tallgrass prairie, for example, have been shown to promote native grass and wildflower diversity, and to benefit the native pollinators and grassland birds that depend on these ecosystems. The calls of frogs in spring are among the oldest sounds on Earth. Frogs are among the earliest vertebrates to have colonized land, and the acoustic communication that drives their breeding behavior has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years. The calls of modern frogs are not simple. Each species has a call that is distinct in pitch, in rhythm, in duration, and in the quality of its sound. In a wetland with multiple frog species calling simultaneously, an experienced ear can identify each one, and the whole forms a layered acoustic texture unlike anything produced by birds or insects. The spring peeper, a tiny tree frog, smaller than a thumb, that lives in woodland wetlands across much of eastern North America, produces a call that is wildly disproportionate to its body size. A single peeper calling close by is sharp and ringing, the sort of sound that makes you look for something much larger. A chorus of hundreds or thousands of peepers from a woodland pond on a mild evening in March or April is an enveloping wall of sound, one of the most intense biological soundscapes in the temperate world. The call of the spring peeper is a simple ascending peep, given at regular intervals. The wood frog's call is more complex, a rapid, ducking series of notes, often described as resembling the quacking of ducks, but shorter and more rhythmic. The American toad's call is a sustained, musical trill, wavering slightly, lasting several seconds and then pausing before being repeated. Male frogs call to establish a breeding territory and attract mates. The calling requires significant energy. A male peeper calling actively through a breeding night expends substantial caloric reserves. Females assess the calls of potential mates based on multiple acoustic features. In many species, females prefer males whose calls are more frequent, louder, or lower in pitch, characteristics that may correlate with male size, health, or territory quality. The calling ceases as quickly as it began. Once mating is complete and eggs are laid, the calling diminishes rapidly. By the time the wood frog tadpoles have developed and begun their transformation in late spring or early summer, the adult frogs have dispersed back into the woodland, as invisible as they were before the breeding season began. Before the vascular plants fully take over the spring landscape, Two ancient groups of organisms are already fully active: mosses and lichens. Mosses are non-vascular plants. They lack the transport systems that move water and nutrients through the tissues of most familiar plants. They absorb water directly through their surfaces and are limited in size by this constraint. But this same characteristic means they are among the first plants to respond to spring moisture. When rain or snowmelt wets the ground after even a brief winter drought, mosses recover and begin photosynthesizing within hours or days. They do not need soil to be warm. They do not need roots to have thawed. They are ready whenever light and moisture are available together. A patch of moss on a north-facing rock face or on the surface of a log may have been brown and dormant through the driest part of winter. When spring rains arrive, it brightens to a vivid, intense green within a day or two. The change is one of the fastest visual transformations in the spring landscape and one of the least noticed. Lichens are not single organisms but composite ones. A fungus and one or more photosynthetic partners, usually green algae or cyanobacteria, living together in a relationship so close that neither partner would survive without the other. Lichens colonize bare rock, tree bark, soil surfaces, and many other substrates where other organisms cannot grow. They are among the hardiest photosynthetic life forms on Earth, capable of surviving in conditions that would kill most plants. Lichens grow extremely slowly. Rates of a centimeter or less per year are typical for many rock-dwelling species. A lichen patch the size of a hand may be decades old. In spring, lichens absorb moisture and become active, metabolizing and growing at their unhurried pace. Their growth is so slow as to be essentially invisible on the timescale of a single season, but their presence is a constant in the landscape. The gray and orange and green and yellow crusts on boulders and cliff faces, the silver-green foliage lichens draping the branches of old trees, the reindeer lichens covering the ground in northern boreal forests. Mountains create their own versions of spring, layered upward in elevation. A mountain in a temperate region is like a latitudinal gradient compressed into a vertical one. The climate at the base of a mountain may be that of a temperate lowland forest. A few hundred meters higher, conditions approximate those of a more northerly latitude. Near the summit, conditions may be alpine or even Arctic. Each of these zones passes through spring at a different time. In spring, the snow line retreats upward week by week. The exposed zone below the retreating snow goes through spring in real time, displaying the season's progression with unusual clarity. A vertical face of a mountain in late April may show bare, blooming meadow at the bottom, then a zone of wet, recently snow-free ground with the first new shoots, then a zone where the previous season's grass is still visible under rotting snow, and finally the winter snowfield above. The movement of animals up the mountain in spring tracks this retreating snow line. Elk move upward following the green up. Grizzly bears in the northern Rockies follow the avalanche slopes and meadows where fresh vegetation is exposed by the snow's retreat. Mountain goats, which have spent the winter on lower, wind-swept terrain, move upward to the higher alpine areas as the season allows. The alpine meadow above the treeline is a spring environment that lasts only a few weeks before summer replaces it. The growing season above treeline is extremely short, sometimes only 6 to 8 weeks between snowmelt and the first autumn frosts. Plants in these environments have evolved remarkable strategies. Cushion growth forms that stay below the level of summer wind, flowers that can photosynthesize at very cold temperatures, seeds that can germinate rapidly and develop quickly. Arctic gentians, alpine avens, sky pilots, and many other alpine wildflowers bloom in the high meadows in midsummer, which is effectively their spring, the beginning of their growing season. The plant communities of alpine zones are among the most specialized in the world, shaped by a spring that arrives late, stays briefly, and departs early. Spring nights are active in ways that daylight doesn't reveal. Many of the movements and behaviors that define spring in the animal world occur entirely in darkness. Amphibian migrations, as noted earlier, often happen on warm, rainy nights. Flying squirrels, which are among the most overlooked woodland mammals in eastern North America, glide between trees in search of food on spring nights, invisible against the dark sky. Beavers are often most active in the hours after midnight, swimming silently along their ponds and streams, cutting branches and repairing their structures. Moths take to the air on spring evenings as soon as temperatures are warm enough. The first moths of the season in temperate regions appear earlier than most people expect. Certain species fly in late February and March in Britain and much of Europe, and some are active at temperatures just above freezing. These early moths are attracted to the flowers that bloom while little else is flying. Pussy willows, early sallows, and other early flowering trees and shrubs. Spring moth assemblages in temperate regions are diverse and have been studied extensively by naturalists and ecologists. Light traps, outdoor lights to which moths are attracted, record the sequence of species through the season, with different species appearing at different points as temperatures warm and their host plants develop. Some spring moths feed on the buds and new leaves of particular tree species, and their flight period is precisely synchronized with the window of leaf development. Raccoons, possums, and skunks become more active in spring, emerging more frequently and ranging more widely as temperatures improve. Skunk breeding occurs in late winter and early spring, and the familiar scent of a skunk on a warm spring night is partly a consequence of breeding activity. Raccoon females with spring-born cubs begin to emerge from their dens in April and May, leading the young to feeding areas in the night. Everything that grows in spring will eventually return to the soil. This is a simple statement but worth dwelling on. The leaf litter of autumn, the fallen branches, the bodies of animals that did not survive the winter. All of these are organic material that the soil community is steadily breaking down. Spring accelerates this decomposition, and the nutrients released fuel the growth above. The invertebrates that do much of this work are rarely observed. Springtails, mites, millipedes, sow-bugs, and many others that live in the litter layer and in the upper soil, shredding and digesting organic material. These animals are tiny. Most are invisible or barely visible to the naked eye, but their collective biomass in a healthy soil ecosystem is enormous. In a single square meter of temperate forest soil, there may be hundreds of thousands of mites and tens of thousands of springtails. The fungi that grow through dead wood and leaf litter are equally important. A single fairy ring mushroom, visible as a circle of fruiting bodies on a lawn or meadow, may represent the surface expression of a mycelial network that covers many square meters of ground and has been growing for years or decades. The mycelium is the true body of the fungus. The mushrooms are its reproductive structures, appearing when conditions are right, often in spring and autumn. The process of decomposition in the soil is, in a sense, the other side of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide from the air and, using sunlight, builds it into organic compounds. Decomposition reverses this, breaking down organic compounds and releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. The two processes are balanced on a planetary scale, though their balance shifts with the seasons. In spring and summer, photosynthesis globally exceeds decomposition, and the atmosphere's carbon dioxide concentration decreases slightly. In autumn and winter, the balance reverses. There is an aspect of spring that resists purely scientific description, which is the quality of how it is perceived. The way spring arrives not just to the landscape but to the person experiencing the landscape. The lengthening of days is felt before it is consciously noticed. Studies of circadian biology suggest that the human body, like the bodies of most vertebrates, is sensitive to seasonal changes in day length. The production of serotonin in the brain is influenced by light exposure, and as days lengthen in spring, many people experience a shift in mood and energy that precedes any change in temperature. The nervous system is itself a kind of phenological instrument, measuring the returning light and responding to it. The first warm day of spring, the day when the temperature climbs suddenly from the gray chill of late winter into genuine warmth, has a particular quality. There is often a sudden appearance of people outdoors. Coats come off prematurely. People sit on benches and steps in the sun. Dogs are walked with more energy. Children appear in parks. The warmth arrives as a kind of permission. The sounds of spring, accumulated over weeks, become a background that one stops hearing consciously, until it is gone. The frog chorus that seems remarkable in March is simply the sound of evening by May. The dawn song of the wood thrush that was so striking in mid-April is, by late May, simply the backdrop to early morning. Only when it is absent, when autumn has come and the frogs have fallen silent and the thrush has gone south, does its absence restore its significance. The smell of cut grass, which first happens in spring when lawns are mowed for the season, is one of the most widely recognized olfactory triggers of the season. The compound responsible, trans-2-hexanol, is released when plant cells are damaged and is detectable by most people at very low concentrations. It is a smell associated by most people in temperate countries with spring and early summer, with warmth and outdoor work and the opening of the season. For the animals that hibernated through winter, spring is first experienced from the inside of a den. Deep hibernation is a physiological state that differs from sleep in important ways. A hibernating ground squirrel, for example, has a body temperature that may drop to just above freezing, a heart rate that has slowed from several hundred beats per minute to only a few per minute, and a metabolic rate that is a tiny fraction of its normal waking state. It is alive but barely, a kind of slowed existence that conserves the fat reserves that must last through months of cold. The arousal from deep hibernation in spring is energetically costly. The animal must warm its body from near freezing to normal operating temperature, which requires burning stored fat rapidly. The return to full consciousness and mobility is not instant. It takes time for the nervous system, the muscles, and the circulatory system to return to normal function. An animal that has just aroused from deep hibernation moves slowly and is not fully alert for some time. Ground squirrels in North America, species like the 13-line ground squirrel and the Richardson's ground squirrel, emerge in spring to a landscape that may still be cold and somewhat bare. The males typically emerge first, several weeks before the females. This early emergence gives them time to establish territories and begin preparing for the brief summer breeding season before females become available. Woodchucks, or groundhogs, emerge from hibernation in late winter or early spring depending on latitude. The famous Groundhog Day tradition of the 2nd of February in North America has its roots in the observation that groundhogs sometimes emerge from their burrows around this time, and the interpretation of this behavior as a seasonal prediction. In practice, the groundhog's emergence is driven by the same physiological cues that drive all hibernators: the slow accumulation of warmth in the soil above the den, signaling that spring is advancing. The Pacific coast of North America experiences spring differently from the interior of the continent. This coast sits under the influence of a large, persistent ocean, the North Pacific, and a prevailing wind that blows from west to east. The ocean moderates temperatures, keeping the coast warmer than the continental interior in winter and cooler than the interior in summer. Spring in this maritime climate is gradual, often cool, and frequently wet. The spring wildflower season on the California coast and in the Coast Ranges is one of the most spectacular in the world in years with above-average rainfall. In the Central Valley of California, the early spring following wet winters can transform vast areas of grassland into carpets of poppies. California poppies, the state flower, which bloom in brilliant orange gold in years when rainfall has been adequate. This phenomenon, visible from great distances and from the air, is one of the dramatic spring wildflower events of western North America. The coastal sage scrub of Southern California blooms in spring with buckwheat, coastal sagebrush, black sage, and numerous other shrubs and wildflowers that have evolved to take advantage of the winter rains before the summer dry season closes the growing window. The chaparral, which covers much of the dry foothills of Central and Southern California, is green and growing in spring and will be brown and dormant by July. Farther north, in the temperate rainforests of the Oregon and Washington coast and on into British Columbia and Alaska, spring is greener and wetter. These forests receive enormous amounts of rainfall and remain green through much of the year. But spring still brings a new pulse of growth as temperatures warm and days lengthen. The understory of these rainforests, ferns, oxalis, and many other shade-tolerant plants, brightens with new growth in spring, and the mosses that cover every surface deepen in color as moisture conditions improve. Gray whales pass close to the shore on their northward journey. Harbor seals haul out in larger numbers. The spring bird migration along the coast brings waves of songbirds to the beachside vegetation and shorebirds to the tidal flats. The precision of spring flowering timing is one of the more remarkable features of plant biology, and it is worth examining in more detail. A flowering plant must solve a timing problem. Bloom too early, and pollinators may not yet be active and frost may damage the flowers. Bloom too late, and the growing season is shorter. Competition with other flowers for pollinators is greater, and the time available for seed development is reduced. The timing of flowering is therefore under strong natural selection, and plants have evolved sophisticated mechanisms to achieve it. These mechanisms vary by species and environment. Many plants use a combination of temperature accumulation and day length cues. Temperature accumulation is often quantified as growing degree days, the sum of daily average temperatures above a base temperature, accumulated from some reference date. A plant that requires, say, 200 growing degree days above 5 degrees Celsius before flowering will bloom at different calendar dates in different years depending on how quickly warmth accumulates, automatically adjusting its timing to match actual seasonal conditions. Vernalization is a second key mechanism. Many plants require a period of cold exposure before they can flower. This is analogous to the chilling requirement of tree buds discussed earlier. Winter annuals and biennials, plants that germinate in autumn, overwinter as seedlings or rosettes, and flower the following spring, use vernalization to ensure they don't flower in their first season of growth. The cold of winter acts as a developmental checkpoint, and only after this checkpoint is passed can the plant progress to flowering in response to warming temperatures. The interaction of vernalization and photoperiodism produces the exquisite timing of spring flowering. A plant that has been vernalized but not yet exposed to the right day length will wait, even if temperatures are warm. One that has met its day length requirement but not been vernalized will not flower. Only when both conditions are satisfied does flowering proceed. Ecologists studying spring have described a phenomenon called the green wave, the progression of spring's biological changes northward across a landscape at roughly the same rate as temperature warming. In eastern North America, the green wave advances northward at a rate of roughly 100 to 300 kilometers per week in spring, depending on the year and the location. This means that if you could observe the landscape from above, you would see the greening of vegetation moving northward like a wave, with the southern regions fully in leaf weeks before the northern regions show any bud break. Migrating birds, many of which are flying northward at this same time, roughly track the advancing green wave. The new leaves and flowers that appear with the wave attract the insects that the birds feed on, and the birds move north at approximately the same rate that the wave advances, staying in the zone of peak food availability as long as possible. This alignment is not perfect or mechanistic. Birds respond to their own internal and environmental cues, and the green wave's speed varies with weather. But the broad pattern of migrants riding the wave northward, following the food as the season advances, has been documented in multiple studies using tracking technology that allows birds to be followed across their entire migratory journey. For a given location, the green wave passes through in a matter of weeks. The peak of migrant abundance, the days when the maximum diversity and number of migrating birds are passing through, corresponds roughly to the period when vegetation is most actively developing. Bud break, early leaf emergence, and the first flowers. This peak migration window is treasured by birdwatchers, who refer to it simply as the peak. Those brief weeks when every morning walk in a woodland or park may produce species that will not be seen there again until the following year. One of the things that defines spring is not any single event but the overall directionality of the season, the sense that changes, once begun, continue in one general direction. Winter has its periods of thaw and its returns of cold, and these reversals can be intense. But spring's general trajectory is toward warmth, toward growth, toward the lengthening of days. Even in a spring with late cold snaps or wet weeks, the trend continues. The days keep lengthening. The sun keeps rising higher. The cumulative warmth keeps accumulating. This directionality is what distinguishes spring from the variable weather of any other season. A warm week in December is a brief anomaly. A cold week in April is a setback, not a reversal. The underlying physical drivers of spring, the Earth's tilt and orbit, are consistent and predictable in a way that local weather is not. Living things seem to have internalized this directionality. The bud that has opened will not close again. The migrant that has arrived is not going back south. The chick that has hatched will not re-enter the egg. Spring's biological processes are largely unidirectional. They can be delayed or damaged by adverse weather, but they proceed in one direction. This gives spring a quality of commitment, of irreversibility, that the season shares with very few other transitions. The irreversibility of spring growth is matched by the season's relentlessness. Spring does not stop for a late frost. It absorbs it, sometimes at a cost, and continues. The tree that loses its first leaves to a late freeze may produce a second flush of growth within days. The amphibian whose eggs are damaged by an ice event may lay again if the season allows. Life has evolved through thousands of springs of varying character, and it has built into itself a resilience appropriate to that variation. We have been in spring for a long time. The season itself is long, depending on how one measures it, 3 months of calendar time, a few weeks of the most intense phenological change, or something in between. We have traveled from the geometry of the tilted earth to the calling of frogs at night, from the chemistry of sap to the flight calls of warblers moving in the dark overhead. Spring is not a simple subject. It is a convergence of light and temperature, of physiology and behavior, of individual organisms and global patterns. It is the moment when the Arctic begins to breathe again, when the oceans release their winter stratification, when every tree and frog and bee and migrant responds to cues that have been accumulating since the darkest days of winter. There is something appealing about spending time with a season from beginning to end. A season is long enough to feel complete, to have a shape, a beginning, a middle, and an end, but short enough that it does not outlast attention. Spring offers a beginning that is clearly defined. The vernal equinox, the last frost, the first frog call, any of these can serve as a marker. And it offers an end that is equally clear, the closing of the canopy, the departure of the spring ephemerals, the arrival of the heat of summer. Between beginning and end is the unfolding of the season itself. A complex, layered, precisely timed, and beautiful process that the natural world executes each year with extraordinary regularity and with constant small variation. No two springs are identical. The timing shifts by days or weeks. Some years bring late cold. Others bring early warmth. Some springs are wet. Others are dry. The natural world absorbs this variation and responds to it. This adaptability is itself one of the qualities of spring worth noticing. The season is not a rigid script. It is a set of possibilities, constrained by physics and chemistry and by the limits of what organisms can tolerate, but expressed differently each year. Birds are the most visible migrants, but many other animals undertake seasonal movements in spring. Monarch butterflies, which winter in the Oyamel fir forests of central Mexico, begin their northward migration in late February and early March. They move in a multi-generational relay. The butterflies that arrive in northern North America in summer are the great-grandchildren of those that left Mexico in spring. The return journey in autumn is made by a single generation that lives much longer than summer generations, a biological mystery whose mechanisms are still being studied. Several species of dragonflies are long-distance migrants, including the common green darner of North America, which migrates northward in spring riding the leading edge of warm southerly winds. The migration of dragonflies is less well studied than that of birds, but radar observations and tagging studies have confirmed that some species travel hundreds of kilometers in a single flight. Gray whales, which breed in the warm lagoons of Baja California in winter, migrate northward along the Pacific coast to feeding grounds in the Bering Sea in spring. Their northward migration, close to shore, is one of the most observable whale migrations in the world, with peak passage along the California coast in March and April. Humpback whales make similar journeys from tropical and subtropical breeding areas to high-latitude feeding grounds. Sea turtles that wintered in warmer waters return northward in spring, following the warming sea surface temperatures. The green turtles and loggerheads of the Atlantic move northward along the Gulf Stream corridor as temperatures warm. Their spring movements track the temperature gradients of the ocean with remarkable precision. Spring, the season, shares its name in many languages with the word for a place where water emerges from the ground. A spring. This is not coincidence. In many languages, both concepts derive from the idea of something rising, of emergence, of water or warmth or light arriving where it was not before. The season and the water feature share an etymology rooted in the concept of upwelling, of something coming forth. Actual springs, places where groundwater reaches the surface, are particularly notable features of the landscape in spring. Groundwater recharge is highest in spring, when snowmelt and rain infiltrate the soil and percolate down to the aquifer. Springs that were reduced to a trickle in late summer may flow strongly in spring. The clear, cold water of a strong spring emerging from a hillside is not snowmelt. It may have taken months or years to percolate through the rock and soil from where it fell as rain or snow. It arrives cold and consistent, temperature buffered by its time underground. Springs support distinctive plant communities. The constant moisture, the consistent temperature, the often mineral-rich water, all of these create conditions that favor particular plants. Watercress, brooklime, water forget-me-not, and many sedges are characteristic of spring seeps and springheads. In forested landscapes, spring seeps support lush growth of ferns, mosses, and skunk cabbage. The cress-filled spring runs of the English chalk downs are a specific habitat type that supports rare invertebrates found almost nowhere else. Springs also provide important habitat for certain fish. Brown trout and brook trout are often associated with spring-fed streams and rivers, which remain cold enough for these cold water species even in the warmest part of summer. In summer, when other stream temperatures might rise above the thermal tolerance of trout, the flow from springs provides cool refugia, cool patches where trout congregate. The wind flowers of spring, so called in their common names because they nod in the slightest breeze, include some of the most recognizable wildflowers of European and North American woodlands. The wood anemone of European woodlands blooms in early spring, while the woodland floor still receives direct sunlight through the bare canopy. A patch of wood anemone in full bloom on a bright April morning, white flowers slightly nodding, held above their deeply lobed leaves on slender stems, is a characteristic image of the spring woodland. The flowers close on cloudy days and at night, reopening when the sun returns. They open at the first warmth of the day, tracking the temperature of the air. The rue anemone and the wood anemone of eastern North American forests occupy a similar ecological role. Both species spread primarily by vegetative means, through the slow growth of underground rhizomes, rather than by seed. A large patch of anemones in a forest may represent a single genetic individual that has been spreading for decades or centuries. Early pollinators, the small bees and flies that are the first to become active in cold spring weather, visit these flowers. The pollinators gain nectar and pollen. The flowers gain the possibility of cross-pollination. Some of these early flowers produce heat, as noted earlier with skunk cabbage, to create a warmer microclimate that attracts cold-tolerant pollinators. Others have bowl-shaped flowers that concentrate sunlight, raising the temperature of the flower interior. Spring has always been the season of planting, and the rhythm of agricultural work in spring is among the oldest patterns in human culture. The timing of planting depends on both soil temperature and the risk of frost. Seeds germinate when soil temperatures exceed species-specific thresholds. Cool season crops like peas, lettuce, and spinach can be planted when soils are as cold as 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, while warm season crops like corn and beans require soils of at least 10 to 15 degrees. Frost after germination can kill seedlings, and so the last expected frost date is a key reference point for spring planting. In traditional agricultural communities, spring planting was a major collective undertaking. The preparation of fields, plowing, harrowing, breaking up the compacted surface to allow rain to enter and seeds to germinate, had to be accomplished quickly when conditions allowed, because the window between the soil being workable and the optimal planting time being passed could be short. The need for speed and labor during spring planting is the root of many of the traditional practices of communal agricultural work. Neighbors helping neighbors get the planting done before the window closed. Modern agriculture has reduced the labor intensity of spring work through mechanization, but the fundamental calendar remains. Farmers in temperate regions watch soil temperatures closely in spring, looking for the moment when conditions are right. Planting too early into cold, wet soil can result in poor germination and disease. Planting too late means a shortened growing season. Spring is not only biological, it is also a period of atmospheric change. One of the more significant atmospheric events of spring is the decline of the polar vortex, the large area of low pressure and cold air that dominates the Arctic atmosphere in winter. As the Arctic warms through spring, the temperature gradient that drives the polar vortex diminishes, and the vortex weakens and breaks down. This process is connected to the increased frequency of blocking patterns in the atmosphere, stationary high-pressure systems that can hold weather patterns in place for days or weeks, producing either extended warmth or extended cold in the affected regions. The chemistry of the lower atmosphere changes in spring as well. Emissions of biogenic volatile organic compounds, chemicals released by plants as a byproduct of growth, increase dramatically with the onset of spring. These compounds, which include isoprene and various terpenes, react with other atmospheric chemicals to form ozone and secondary organic aerosols. The hazy blue appearance of mountain forests in late spring and summer, the blue of the Blue Ridge Mountains and similar landscape features, is partly caused by the scattering of light by these aerosols. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere follows a seasonal cycle driven largely by the northern hemisphere spring. As vegetation in the northern hemisphere takes up carbon dioxide through photosynthesis from spring through autumn, the global atmospheric concentration of CO2 declines slightly. In winter, with less photosynthesis and more respiration and decomposition, CO2 concentrations rise again. This annual sawing pattern, visible in the Keeling curve that has tracked atmospheric CO2 since 1958, is one of the most graphic depictions of the breadth of the biosphere. We have traveled a long way through spring, from the geometry of the Earth's tilt to the cells of a maple bud, from the migration routes of warblers to the spawning habits of pike, from the soil to the ocean, from the Arctic to the southern hemisphere. And yet spring itself is quiet about all of this. It does not announce its complexity. It arrives as it always has, first as light, then as warmth, then as movement and growth and sound. It does not require understanding to be felt. It requires only presence. The snowdrop pushes up through the leaf litter on a schedule that is entirely its own. The song sparrow returns to the same brushy edge of the same field where it was born. The vernal pool fills with the calling of wood frogs in the same weeks that it filled last year, and the year before that. The maple sap runs when the conditions are right, as it has for as long as maples have grown in cold climates. Spring is repetition. It is the return of something that was not absent but only waiting. The light was always there, in the mathematics of the Earth's orbit. The warmth was coming. The seeds were ready. Few organisms demonstrate the patience of spring more quietly than bulb-forming plants. A tulip bulb, planted in autumn and sitting in cold soil through winter, is not dormant in any simple sense. Processes are occurring within it throughout the cold months, the chilling requirement being met, the internal chemistry slowly changing, the embryonic flower and leaves developing within the layered scales of the bulb. The cold is not an interruption. The cold is a prerequisite. When temperatures begin to warm, the cells of the bulb begin to divide and elongate. The shoot pushes upward through the soil, sensing the gravity of the earth and growing against it. If a bulb is planted upside down, the shoot still finds its way. It can reorient itself in the dark soil by responding to gravitational cues. Wild bulb-forming plants of the Mediterranean region, fritillaries, grape hyacinths, wild tulips, asphodels, bloom in early to mid-spring before the summer drought arrives. These plants have evolved their bulbous storage organs as an adaptation to a climate with wet winters and dry summers. They do all their growing and reproducing in the brief, moist spring window, then retreat below ground for the rest of the year. The crocus, naturalizing in lawns and meadows across much of Europe and North America, often blooms while snow is still on the ground. Purple, white, yellow, or striped, the crocus flowers appear sometimes as early as February, emerging through frozen ground with an apparent indifference to cold that is rooted in physiology. The cells of the crocus contain compounds that lower their freezing point, allowing tissues to remain functional at temperatures that would damage less cold-tolerant plants. It may be useful, in a late section like this one, simply to walk through a temperate forest in May and observe what is there. The path is soft underfoot with composted leaf litter. The roots of large trees cross the path in places, and where they have lifted the soil, small plants have taken advantage of the disturbance. The canopy is nearly full now, but the leaves are still a bright, vivid green, the slightly yellow green of new growth rather than the deeper, cooler green of midsummer. The light filters through in patches, moving slightly as a breeze touches the upper canopy. The air smells of soil and of fresh leaf growth and, faintly, of the flowers visible at the edge of the path, white flowers of wood sorrel, the pale yellow of wood anemone past its peak, the fading blue of bluebells. The bluebells are nearly over, their carpet of bright color already fading to the brownish purple of seed capsules forming on the dried stems. There is sound from many directions. A wood thrush is singing from somewhere in the understory, its flute-like phrases rising and falling. A chickadee calls from the canopy. Far off, there is the drumming of a woodpecker on a hollow tree. A small creak is audible below the path, running over stones, its sound absorbed and scattered by the trees. A ruffed grouse flushes from near the path with the explosive wing thunder that characterizes this species' alarm response, disappearing into the undergrowth. The footprint it leaves is a depression in the soft soil, surrounded by the imprints of the leaves it walked through. Higher up on the slope, where the soil is thinner and the canopy less complete, the understory is different. Mountain laurel in bud but not yet open. Lowbush blueberry with small white urn-shaped flowers that will become berries in July. The soil here has less organic matter, and the plants are shorter and more widely spaced. Coming back down toward the creek, the ground becomes wetter. Skunk cabbage leaves, enormous now, their broad green blades filling the air over the wet ground, have replaced the earlier season woodland plants. Sensitive fern is unfurling. Jewelweed, which in late summer will produce orange flowers and the explosive seed pods that earn it its name, is just a few centimeters tall, its round, slightly waxy leaves catching the light. A spring is visible where water emerges from the bank beside the creek. A small trickle of cold, clear water that forms a patch of bright green moss and watercress before joining the main stream. The water is cold enough that a hand placed in it for more than a moment aches. It will be this temperature in August. It comes from deep in the ground, where the temperature is constant. This is May. This is spring late in its arc, beginning to give way to early summer. The light will be longer for another few weeks before it begins to shorten again. The birds are nesting. The soil is warm and active. The trees are in full growth. And somewhere, in the dark and the distance, the first fireflies are preparing to emerge. The evening light of a late spring day has a particular quality of suspension. The shadows lengthen slowly. The air, which has been warm through the afternoon, begins to cool as the sun drops. The crows that have been active through the day begin to move toward their roost, passing overhead in loose, chattering groups. A heron wings slowly down the valley, its great gray form unhurried against the pale sky. From the pond or the flooded meadow, the frogs are calling. Spring peepers, which have been calling since March, continue into May. Toads have joined them, their long, musical trills filling the warm evenings. The sound carries far across open country. The bats are out. Small brown bats, Myotis species, move along the woodland edge, catching insects in the air with an agility that makes their erratic flight seem choreographed. They have been awake and active for a matter of weeks, having emerged from hibernation in early spring, and their rapid hunting in the evening light is the expression of a hunger that winter imposed and spring is now resolving. Overhead, the sky is deepening. The first stars are appearing in the east. A nighthawk calls, a nasal, buzzy note. As it hunts at high altitude, its erratic flight barely visible against the darkening sky. The temperature drops another degree. The spring night is gentle. It is not the harsh, dangerous cold of winter nights. It is cool enough to require a coat if one sits still, but not cold enough to turn the breath to mist. The ground holds the warmth of the day and releases it slowly. The frogs continue. The nighthawk calls again, farther away. A whippoorwill, if one is near a woodland edge in the right part of the eastern forest, begins its repetitive, carrying call from somewhere in the dark understory. The insects chirp. Spring, this late in the season, is comfortable with itself. It has done most of what it came to do. The seeds are germinating. The nests have been built. The migrants have arrived. As spring turns toward summer, what it leaves behind is the infrastructure of the year. The trees, now in full leaf, will continue photosynthesizing and growing through the summer. The root systems are expanding. The wood laid down this year, the light-colored early wood and the denser late wood that together make one ring in the cross-section of the trunk, will be permanent. Years from now, a tree that was a small seedling this spring will carry in its rings the record of this year's growing conditions. A wide ring if the year was good, a narrow one if it was dry or cold, a normal ring if the season was average. The nests built this spring may be used again, repaired and rebuilt in subsequent springs. Or they may be abandoned, taken over by other species, slowly decomposing back into the litter from which the nest material was gathered. The eggs that were laid are hatching or have already hatched. The chicks that survived will depart before autumn, some to overwinter nearby, some to travel thousands of miles south. The seeds that were set in spring are developing on their parent plants. Some will disperse in early summer, carried by wind or animals. Others will wait until autumn, holding their potential through the summer, to be released when conditions for dispersal are favorable. The soil, enriched by the spring's decomposition and microbial activity, is now supporting a full growing season of plant production. The energy captured by photosynthesis all summer will eventually return to the soil as leaf litter in autumn, there to be decomposed and recycled through the following spring's growth. And the light, which began to increase in December, will reach its maximum at the summer solstice in June, and then begin once more to diminish. The planet continues its orbit. The tilt that made spring possible is already making summer inevitable, and then autumn, and then winter, and then spring again. Spring has been occurring on this planet for a very long time. The Earth's tilt is ancient. The orbital mechanics that produce the seasons have been operating since the solar system stabilized its current configuration billions of years ago. The seasons, or something like them, have driven biological cycles on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. The first land plants appeared in the Ordovician and Silurian periods, perhaps 470 million years ago. Whether they experienced something like a seasonal cycle depends on the continental configuration and climate of those ancient times. The evidence suggests that early in Earth's history, seasonal cycles existed, but may have been quite different in character from the seasons we know. Deciduous trees that drop their leaves in autumn and regrow them in spring, appeared in the Cretaceous period, perhaps 90 million years ago, in response to the evolving seasonal climate. The angiosperms, flowering plants, diversified explosively during the Cretaceous, and with them came the pollinators. The bees, the flies, the beetles that visit flowers. The spring relationship between flowers and pollinators has deep roots. The birds we see returning in spring are, in evolutionary terms, the descendants of dinosaurs, specifically the Maniraptoran theropods from which birds evolved during the Mesozoic era. The first bird-like creature capable of migration, if it ever existed, flew over a very different world than the one we know, but it was orienting by the same stars, sensing the same magnetic field, responding to the same seasonal light. Spring, in its deepest sense, is one of the oldest patterns on Earth. We have been traveling through spring for a long time now. If you are still with us, following along, listening, maybe watching the ceiling in the dark, thank you for the company. There is something fitting about moving slowly through spring in the small hours of the night, when the world outside is quiet and the season itself is suspended between one day and the next. If you fell asleep somewhere along the way, that too is fitting. Spring doesn't require an audience. The frogs are calling tonight, somewhere. The wood thrush has been silent since sundown, but it will start again before you are awake. The tulip tree is forming its first leaves. The creek is running full. The migratory warblers are crossing somewhere in the dark overhead. A thin, brief note from the sky. The soil is warming. The light is returning. Everything that needs to know that the season has changed already knows. You can rest. Gray whales, which breed in the warm lagoons of Baja California in winter, migrate northward along the Pacific coast to feeding grounds in the Bering Sea in spring. Their northward migration, close to shore, is one of the most observable whale migrations in the world, with peak passage along the California coast in March and April. Humpback whales make similar journeys from tropical and subtropical breeding areas to high-latitude feeding grounds. Sea turtles that wintered in warmer waters return northward in spring, following the warming sea surface temperatures. The green turtles and loggerheads of the Atlantic move northward along the Gulf Stream corridor as temperatures warm. Their spring movements track the temperature gradients of the ocean with remarkable precision. Spring, the season, shares its name in many languages with the word for a place where water emerges from the ground. A spring. This is not coincidence. In many languages, both concepts derive from the idea of something rising, of emergence, of water or warmth or light arriving where it was not before. The season and the water feature share an etymology rooted in the concept of upwelling, of something coming forth. Actual springs, places where groundwater reaches the surface, are particularly notable features of the landscape in spring. Groundwater recharge is highest in spring, when snowmelt and rain infiltrate the soil and percolate down to the aquifer. Springs that were reduced to a trickle in late summer may flow strongly in spring. The clear, cold water of a strong spring emerging from a hillside is not snowmelt. It may have taken months or years to percolate through the rock and soil from where it fell as rain or snow. It arrives cold and consistent, temperature buffered by its time underground. Springs support distinctive plant communities. The constant moisture, the consistent temperature, the often mineral-rich water, all of these create conditions that favor particular plants. Watercress, brooklime, water forget-me-not, and many sedges are characteristic of spring seeps and springheads. In forested landscapes, spring seeps support lush growth of ferns, mosses, and skunk cabbage. The cress-filled spring runs of the English chalk downs are a specific habitat type that supports rare invertebrates found almost nowhere else. Springs also provide important habitat for certain fish. Brown trout and brook trout are often associated with spring-fed streams and rivers, which remain cold enough for these cold water species even in the warmest part of summer. In summer, when other stream temperatures might rise above the thermal tolerance of trout, the flow from springs provides cool refugia, cool patches where trout congregate. The wind flowers of spring, so called in their common names because they nod in the slightest breeze, include some of the most recognizable wildflowers of European and North American woodlands. The wood anemone of European woodlands blooms in early spring, while the woodland floor still receives direct sunlight through the bare canopy. A patch of wood anemone in full bloom on a bright April morning, white flowers slightly nodding, held above their deeply lobed leaves on slender stems, is a characteristic image of the spring woodland. The flowers close on cloudy days and at night, reopening when the sun returns. They open at the first warmth of the day, tracking the temperature of the air. The rue anemone and the wood anemone of eastern North American forests occupy a similar ecological role. Both species spread primarily by vegetative means, through the slow growth of underground rhizomes, rather than by seed. A large patch of anemones in a forest may represent a single genetic individual that has been spreading for decades or centuries. Early pollinators, the small bees and flies that are the first to become active in cold spring weather, visit these flowers. The pollinators gain nectar and pollen. The flowers gain the possibility of cross-pollination. Some of these early flowers produce heat, as noted earlier with skunk cabbage, to create a warmer microclimate that attracts cold-tolerant pollinators. Others have bowl-shaped flowers that concentrate sunlight, raising the temperature of the flower interior. Spring has always been the season of planting, and the rhythm of agricultural work in spring is among the oldest patterns in human culture. The timing of planting depends on both soil temperature and the risk of frost. Seeds germinate when soil temperatures exceed species-specific thresholds. Cool season crops like peas, lettuce, and spinach can be planted when soils are as cold as 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, while warm season crops like corn and beans require soils of at least 10 to 15 degrees. Frost after germination can kill seedlings, and so the last expected frost date is a key reference point for spring planting. In traditional agricultural communities, spring planting was a major collective undertaking. The preparation of fields, plowing, harrowing, breaking up the compacted surface to allow rain to enter and seeds to germinate, had to be accomplished quickly when conditions allowed, because the window between the soil being workable and the optimal planting time being passed could be short. The need for speed and labor during spring planting is the root of many of the traditional practices of communal agricultural work, neighbors helping neighbors get the planting done before the window closed. Modern agriculture has reduced the labor intensity of spring work through mechanization, but the fundamental calendar remains. Farmers in temperate regions watch soil temperatures closely in spring, looking for the moment when conditions are right. Planting too early into cold, wet soil can result in poor germination and disease. Planting too late means a shortened growing season. Spring is not only biological, it is also a period of atmospheric change. One of the more significant atmospheric events of spring is the decline of the polar vortex, the large area of low pressure and cold air that dominates the Arctic atmosphere in winter. As the Arctic warms through spring, the temperature gradient that drives the polar vortex diminishes, and the vortex weakens and breaks down. This process is connected to the increased frequency of blocking patterns in the atmosphere, stationary high-pressure systems that can hold weather patterns in place for days or weeks, producing either extended warmth or extended cold in the affected regions. The chemistry of the lower atmosphere changes in spring as well. Emissions of biogenic volatile organic compounds, chemicals released by plants as a byproduct of growth, increase dramatically with the onset of spring. These compounds, which include isoprene and various terpenes, react with other atmospheric chemicals to form ozone and secondary organic aerosols. The hazy blue appearance of mountain forests in late spring and summer, the blue of the Blue Ridge Mountains and similar landscape features, is partly caused by the scattering of light by these aerosols. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere follows a seasonal cycle driven largely by the northern hemisphere spring. As vegetation in the northern hemisphere takes up carbon dioxide through photosynthesis from spring through autumn, the global atmospheric concentration of CO2 declines slightly. In winter, with less photosynthesis and more respiration and decomposition, CO2 concentrations rise again. This annual sawing pattern, visible in the Keeling curve that has tracked atmospheric CO2 since 1958, is one of the most graphic depictions of the breadth of the biosphere. We have traveled a long way through spring, from the geometry of the Earth's tilt to the cells of a maple bud, from the migration routes of warblers to the spawning habits of pike, from the soil to the ocean, from the Arctic to the southern hemisphere. And yet spring itself is quiet about all of this. It does not announce its complexity. It arrives as it always has, first as light, then as warmth, then as movement and growth and sound. It does not require understanding to be felt. It requires only presence. The snowdrop pushes up through the leaf litter on a schedule that is entirely its own. The song sparrow returns to the same brushy edge of the same field where it was born. The vernal pool fills with the calling of wood frogs in the same weeks that it filled last year, and the year before that. The maple sap runs when the conditions are right, as it has for as long as maples have grown in cold climates. Spring is repetition. It is the return of something that was not absent but only waiting. The light was always there, in the mathematics of the Earth's orbit. The warmth was coming. The seeds were ready. Few organisms demonstrate the patience of spring more quietly than bulb-forming plants. A tulip bulb, planted in autumn and sitting in cold soil through winter, is not dormant in any simple sense. Processes are occurring within it throughout the cold months. The chilling requirement being met, the internal chemistry slowly changing, the embryonic flower and leaves developing within the layered scales of the bulb. The cold is not an interruption. The cold is a prerequisite. When temperatures begin to warm, the cells of the bulb begin to divide and elongate. The shoot pushes upward through the soil, sensing the gravity of the earth and growing against it. If a bulb is planted upside down, the shoot still finds its way. It can reorient itself in the dark soil by responding to gravitational cues. Wild bulb-forming plants of the Mediterranean region, fritillaries, grape hyacinths, wild tulips, asphodels, bloom in early to mid-spring before the summer drought arrives. These plants have evolved their bulbous storage organs as an adaptation to a climate with wet winters and dry summers. They do all their growing and reproducing in the brief, moist spring window, then retreat below ground for the rest of the year. The crocus, naturalizing in lawns and meadows across much of Europe and North America, often blooms while snow is still on the ground. Purple, white, yellow, or striped, the crocus flowers appear sometimes as early as February, emerging through frozen ground with an apparent indifference to cold that is rooted in physiology. The cells of the crocus contain compounds that lower their freezing point, allowing tissues to remain functional at temperatures that would damage less cold-tolerant plants. It may be useful, in a late section like this one, simply to walk through a temperate forest in May and observe what is there. The path is soft underfoot with composted leaf litter. The roots of large trees cross the path in places, and where they have lifted the soil, small plants have taken advantage of the disturbance. The canopy is nearly full now, but the leaves are still a bright, vivid green, the slightly yellow-green of new growth rather than the deeper, cooler green of midsummer. The light filters through in patches, moving slightly as a breeze touches the upper canopy. The air smells of soil and of fresh leaf growth and, faintly, of the flowers visible at the edge of the path, white flowers of wood sorrel, the pale yellow of wood anemone past its peak, the fading blue of bluebells. The bluebells are nearly over, their carpet of bright color already fading to the brownish purple of seed capsules forming on the dried stems. There is sound from many directions. A wood thrush is singing from somewhere in the understory, its flute-like phrases rising and falling. A chickadee calls from the canopy. Far off, there is the drumming of a woodpecker on a hollow tree. A small creek is audible below the path, running over stones, its sound absorbed and scattered by the trees. A ruffed grouse flushes from near the path with the explosive wing thunder that characterizes this species' alarm response, disappearing into the undergrowth. The footprint it leaves is a depression in the soft soil, surrounded by the imprints of the leaves it walked through. Higher up on the slope, where the soil is thinner and the canopy less complete, the understory is different. Mountain laurel in bud but not yet open. Lowbush blueberry with small white urn-shaped flowers that will become berries in July. The soil here has less organic matter, and the plants are shorter and more widely spaced. Coming back down toward the creek, the ground becomes wetter. Skunk cabbage leaves, enormous now, their broad green blades filling the air over the wet ground, have replaced the earlier season woodland plants. Sensitive fern is unfurling. Jewelweed, which in late summer will produce orange flowers and the explosive seed pods that earn it its name, is just a few centimeters tall, its round, slightly waxy leaves catching the light. A spring is visible where water emerges from the bank beside the creek. A small trickle of cold, clear water that forms a patch of bright green moss and watercress before joining the main stream. The water is cold enough that a hand placed in it for more than a moment aches. It will be this temperature in August. It comes from deep in the ground, where the temperature is constant. This is May. This is spring late in its arc, beginning to give way to early summer. The light will be longer for another few weeks before it begins to shorten again. The birds are nesting. The soil is warm and active. The trees are in full growth. And somewhere, in the dark and the distance, the first fireflies are preparing to emerge. The evening light of a late spring day has a particular quality of suspension. The shadows lengthen slowly. The air, which has been warm through the afternoon, begins to cool as the sun drops. The crows that have been active through the day begin to move toward their roost, passing overhead in loose, chattering groups. A heron wings slowly down the valley, its great gray form unhurried against the pale sky. From the pond or the flooded meadow, the frogs are calling. Spring peepers, which have been calling since March, continue into May. Toads have joined them, their long, musical trills filling the warm evenings. The sound carries far across open country. The bats are out. Small brown bats, Myotis species, move along the woodland edge, catching insects in the air with an agility that makes their erratic flight seem choreographed. They have been awake and active for a matter of weeks, having emerged from hibernation in early spring. And their rapid hunting in the evening light is the expression of a hunger that winter imposed and spring is now resolving. Overhead, the sky is deepening. The first stars are appearing in the east. A nighthawk calls, a nasal, buzzy note. As it hunts at high altitude, its erratic flight barely visible against the darkening sky. The temperature drops another degree. The spring night is gentle. It is not the harsh, dangerous cold of winter nights. It is cool enough to require a coat if one sits still, but not cold enough to turn the breath to mist. The ground holds the warmth of the day and releases it slowly. The frogs continue. The nighthawk calls again, farther away. A whippoorwill, if one is near a woodland edge in the right part of the eastern forest, begins its repetitive, carrying call from somewhere in the dark understory. The insects chirp. Spring, this late in the season, is comfortable with itself. It has done most of what it came to do. The seeds are germinating. The nests have been built. The migrants have arrived. As spring turns toward summer, what it leaves behind is the infrastructure of the year. The trees, now in full leaf, will continue photosynthesizing and growing through the summer. The root systems are expanding. The wood laid down this year, the light-colored early wood and the denser late wood that together make one ring in the cross-section of the trunk, will be permanent. Years from now, a tree that was a small seedling this spring will carry in its rings the record of this year's growing conditions. A wide ring if the year was good, a narrow one if it was dry or cold, a normal ring if the season was average. The nests built this spring may be used again, repaired and rebuilt in subsequent springs. Or they may be abandoned, taken over by other species, slowly decomposing back into the litter from which the nest material was gathered. The eggs that were laid are hatching or have already hatched. The chicks that survived will depart before autumn, some to overwinter nearby, some to travel thousands of miles south. The seeds that were set in spring are developing on their parent plants. Some will disperse in early summer, carried by wind or animals. Others will wait until autumn, holding their potential through the summer, to be released when conditions for dispersal are favorable. The soil, enriched by the spring's decomposition and microbial activity, is now supporting a full growing season of plant production. The energy captured by photosynthesis all summer will eventually return to the soil as leaf litter in autumn, there to be decomposed and recycled through the following spring's growth. And the light, which began to increase in December, will reach its maximum at the summer solstice in June, and then begin once more to diminish. The planet continues its orbit. The tilt that made spring possible is already making summer inevitable, and then autumn, and then winter, and then spring again. Spring has been occurring on this planet for a very long time. The Earth's tilt is ancient. The orbital mechanics that produce the seasons have been operating since the solar system stabilized its current configuration billions of years ago. The seasons, or something like them, have driven biological cycles on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. The first land plants appeared in the Ordovician and Silurian periods, perhaps 470 million years ago. Whether they experienced something like a seasonal cycle depends on the continental configuration and climate of those ancient times. The evidence suggests that early in Earth's history, seasonal cycles existed, but may have been quite different in character from the seasons we know. Deciduous trees that drop their leaves in autumn and regrow them in spring, appeared in the Cretaceous period, perhaps 90 million years ago, in response to the evolving seasonal climate. The angiosperms, flowering plants, diversified explosively during the Cretaceous, and with them came the pollinators, the bees, the flies, the beetles that visit flowers. The spring relationship between flowers and pollinators has deep roots. The birds we see returning in spring are, in evolutionary terms, the descendants of dinosaurs, specifically the Maniraptoran theropods from which birds evolved during the Mesozoic era. The first bird-like creature capable of migration, if it ever existed, flew over a very different world than the one we know, but it was orienting by the same stars, sensing the same magnetic field, responding to the same seasonal light. Spring, in its deepest sense, is one of the oldest patterns on Earth. We have been traveling through spring for a long time now. If you are still with us, following along, listening, maybe watching the ceiling in the dark, thank you for the company. There is something fitting about moving slowly through spring in the small hours of the night, when the world outside is quiet and the season itself is suspended between one day and the next. If you fell asleep somewhere along the way, that too is fitting. Spring doesn't require an audience. The frogs are calling tonight, somewhere. The wood thrush has been silent since sundown, but it will start again before you are awake. The tulip tree is forming its first leaves. The creek is running full. The migratory warblers are crossing somewhere in the dark overhead. A thin, brief note from the sky. The soil is warming. The light is returning. Everything that needs to know that the season has changed already knows. You can rest.